When you've had the conversations over and over in your head where you say, I don't want to do this anymore, and then you are standing there witnessing yourself doing it, the only thing that you could say is, I guess I have to do this.
Yeah, like I'm out of control now.
Like
that's the point where you can sit here and say, like, I'm out of control. Like,
That's so funny.
When you can be watching yourself doing it and thinking, why am I doing this?
I pull it back to you. Remember you made the beaten off joke where you're like, yo, nasty. I know like I just, in my head, you were like, you're doing it and you don't want to do it and you feel bad immediately after doing it. I was just like, are you guys talking about jerking off? It sounds like you guys are talking about jerking off.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this and totally redeem yourself.
Yo, what's up, internet? Welcome back to another episode of Three Averagely Intelligent Dudes Discussing Dangerous Ideas. How you feeling, fellas?
Feeling very well, sir.
Yeah,
feeling very well. Very educated.
Yeah, I know,
Feeling
right?
very educated.
Yeah, definitely been studying up a lot and learning a lot.
Definitely learning a lot about audio.
Definitely. Definitely learning a lot
about audio.
For sure.
Let's just say that this podcast could have started hours ago.
We literally been here for about 3 hours now just working on our setup. So that's cool, though. Improving the show always. Trying to bring you the best quality product that we can.
Yeah, exactly.
Today, we got an interesting little topic that we're going to discuss. We're going to talk about addiction. I was going to say addiction in America, but, I mean, it's more so like addiction across the planet.
I mean, we're going to be talking about Portugal and their solutions.
Yeah,
so
true.
It's a global
It's a worldwide problem, too.
Yeah,
so I think
for sure.
It's a human problem.
It's a human problem, 100%.
Yeah.
That's something I definitely want to talk about a little bit, is like the psychology of it and stuff like that too. But addiction in the sense of drugs and alcohol, I think, is where
behavior
and behavior, right? Like I think it ends a lot in drug addiction because that's like the easy pull. I don't know how to really like word that, but that's the low hanging fruit of addiction. That's the thing that I think will grab that little addiction gene.
It's the most tabooed addictions.
But
so yeah, and
it plays on that chord.
It gets it. Yeah. And it's not only is it like you said, it's not only genetic, but it's also, so you might be predetermined for it.
Yeah.
But it's also it's something, like I said, that's tabooed, so it sticks out when you see it in society, whereas some other more subtle addictions that people don't necessarily consider don't stick out so much because it seems like an everyday action. But as we all know, and I think the listeners can as well if they reflect a little bit, we can take any action a little bit too far.
Yeah, physical consumption is where it becomes like when you're like food. Food is an addictive substance that you physically consume. Drugs are a
One
substance.
of my friends once said, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but one of my friends once said, and I love this quote, food is the worst drug of all.
I've heard people say religion, like
it's the worst drug of all.
Well, no, not that it's the worst drug of all. It's just like the two biggest addictions or the two big, alcohol and religion.
Yeah.
So
alcohol and religion, yeah. I hear that.
So I forgot what I was saying.
No,
I'm sorry, I fucked you up.
You said food was a big.
So it's about the ingestion. So the idea being that addictive behaviors and stuff like that, it's probably a lot easier to hide picking your nose or eating your nails because you can just do that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But if you're consuming a drug and you got to ingest it in some way, or you're consuming food, you're addicted to, eating a ton and you're like, just.
That's true. Picking your nose, like the removal of the boogers is not seen by other people. The removal of your nails is not really noticed. So I think, is that kind of what you're saying? Is like
addictive behavior of running is something that, like, you know what I'm saying? Or the addictive behavior of.
That is a negative or bad.
Well, not even just that. It's the idea of consumption versus not consumption. Like I am ingesting something into my body as an addictive force. Like I have to consume this thing. I am addicted to consuming this thing, whatever that thing is, as opposed to I'm addicted to this action.
To doing this thing. But I think you could get addicted to both.
They're both addicted. Yeah, I'm not claiming that you can do one or the other. I'm saying that there's a difference, I believe, in them between an ingest. Like when you said a taboo. And you were like, well, you can't really, in public, you just can't be eating drugs, like.
So not true. I watched my buddy on Instagram the other day post on his Instagram story of this homie just sitting on the street, full on like hitting the needle,
which is taboo, right?
Oh, 100%, right? But I've had people smoke meth
to make it to your point.
No, and that's what I was thinking about, like when you were talking about the escalation of the addiction, because you can be addicted to like drugs, for example, in the shadows for a long time, but then that level of addiction can come to the point where you can't even wait to get to somewhere of you got to pick your nose right now. Like you got to do it right here in front of everybody because you're so
addicted
called
to
that.
Yeah, the addiction outweighs the taboo.
Right. But I definitely think it plays in that, like you were talking about, like your rate of consumption, right? Like I think if you look at it from a psychology standpoint, you're just it's a stimulus and a response, right? And that's like a behavior essentially, the stimulus, and you respond with a certain behavior, and it's like you become hyper intensified or hyper kind of stuck on that treadmill of like certain.
Is that Pavlov's theory, right?
Yeah, dude. So yes, essentially, like the one thing they've done with rats and stuff. Have you ever seen where they like give them the dopamine button? Like they give a mouse.
Yeah, we've talked about mouse.
We talked about it before, and they'll hit that button until they die because it's like in the end, you're just trying to complete these little chemical loops in your brain, you know.
Although I will point out that
identify addiction as
the only way that you can get rats, I don't know anything about like a dopamine button. I know that they've done experiments. It sounds like what you're talking about is the experiments where they use rats and they gave them cocaine in the water. I don't know if that's exactly
Utopia experience.
No, this one was one where they literally had a dopamine drip in their brain or something, and they just pressed a button to get it to like release or something.
Oh, okay. Well, that's even more severe than the one that I'm talking about. The one that I'm talking about actually had like rats that were like living and stuff, and they just had cocaine in their water.
Yeah.
Now, but the funny thing about it is that the rats, like if you'd have like rats that act the way they normally would in nature, where they have communities and other rats that they interact with and stuff like that, it's actually really hard to get them addicted to cocaine. It's
really?
Very hard. They will go, like if you put regular water and cocaine water in a community of rats, they will try the cocaine water once and they won't touch it ever again.
Really?
And they will drink the regular water. But if you isolate rats from other rats and you put you like starve them a little bit and stuff like that, you get them to do compliance behavior, which is what Pavlov's whole experiments were based off of. He would have to starve those dogs before they would act like that around the food. So it's the same thing. If you do that, then they will drink that water until they literally die. Dude. Because it's the only thing that they have.
I think you're both describing the same experiment, the mouse utopia experiment.
I think so.
It's crazy how much you kind of
maybe they did it in different ways. This is the only one
also
I've
the
heard
guy
of.
that did that experiment was a fucking lunatic.
Crazy
the
motherfucker.
Mouse thing?
He just kept getting this funding and building these giant mouse
crazy
fucking societies and studying them and getting more and more intricate, and like all the mice from the first one just die horrible deaths, and he's like,
I don't know, maybe we're not talking about the same people.
I'm telling you, the Mouse Utopia guy did multiple mouse experiments.
Well,
and he did
the people I'm talking about aren't
twisted.
the only people that have done that. But the people I'm talking about were clinical psychologists.
John B. Calhoun.
I believe this is the video I've watched on it, but the Mouse Utopia one there, the down the rabbit hole.
Oh, okay,
I don't know any of the other ones.
Interesting.
But that's pictures from it as well.
Definitely got to look into that, dude, and figure out what, because like you said, we've all heard of these like experiments in passing, but I don't think I've ever done.
That's true. I never actually looked into it myself.
I
I'm
watched
just
that whole
regurgitating something
minutes.
Jordan Peterson says.
Yeah, I've only heard of them in like people I listen to have used these experiments as reference to their points.
Exactly.
To their
points. This guy was like, look at this crazy guy that did these crazy things. Yeah.
But you opened me up to bring what I really wanted to talk about in this sense too. It's like I was watching this thing about addictions and stuff, as we sometimes we do a little educating ourselves before we come on the podcast. Let's go.
We like to come sourced and
reliable,
reliable,
understand something about the conversation. And so I was doing some research, and this dude was doing a TED talk on this. It's called The Addiction in the Age of Brain Science, and he's talking about how psychology is working together with, I guess, pharmaceuticals, just all types of people to add what they know about addiction and stuff like that. And one of the things he points to was that social isolation is one of the main causes or correlations. There's something you always say, correlation doesn't actually mean causation.
Right.
But they do kind of through study find that it might be actual causation. But there's definitely a correlation between this particular part of the brain that governs social interaction and addiction.
If you make people feel pain, simple physical pain, that's exactly, or not exactly, but pretty much the signature that you would see, these two structures. Now, there's recent debate how identical or non-identical are these two signatures. It's clear that they're not exactly the same, but they're very strongly overlapping, and the activation of the insula is a common element of these networks that get activated. It induces these emotions, the purpose of which is, of course, to make you act to fix whatever feels wrong, right? Homeostatic emotions. But it's also doing a lot of other things.
So this would like control if you felt uncomfortable in the temperature of a room for
or
instance.
something, or like
we know
felt
that
an urge
that's
to
an
do
important element of addictive disorders. Taking an unreasonable level of
fascinating.
risk in order to receive an immediate reward. It tells us that when we induce cravings for whatever drug a person is addicted to, that is associated with an activation of the insula. You see that here on the sides in the temporal lobe. In this case, this is alcohol addiction, but the fascinating thing is that this could be heroin, this could be cocaine, this could be nicotine. This beautiful study came around this case series of patients who had stroke, and some of them had stroke that affected their insula, and lo and behold, those that had the stroke in that location were able to quit smoking, and they would not feel any cravings.
And you can control your brain.
Yeah,
Right?
You can.
You can control your brain, right? Like you can tell your brain, like, hey, quit it. Stop craving that shit.
I mean,
It's not quite that simple.
I don't
but
think
yes.
you can just tell it. I
Yeah,
think if
you
can develop it over time to move away from that craving. Like obviously, like I quit smoking, for example, and I wasn't just like, hey, don't crave nicotine anymore.
I'm saying though, if you get that craving, you can then be like, I'm gonna do something else. I'm gonna
Yes,
not crave
you
this.
can-
So
I'm
it's-
gonna
yeah.
shut this shit down.
You
That's
can
what I
work
mean by
against it.
controlling it.
You
Is
can
like
work
having
against
the ability.
You can have
to-
the ability to not give into the craving.
The greatest stressor is being excluded from the group. And that is, of course, something that happens in addiction. And one reason I think this has received too little attention scientifically is that it's not all that easy to study. How do you study social exclusion in the tunnel of the MRI camera? Well, there are some ingenious ways of doing that. Naomi Eisenberger and her husband at UCLA have been at the forefront of this already a decade ago. They were able to take a silly little video game that had been out already before, Cyberball, where you toss a ball around between these little cartoon characters, and then all of a sudden they stop passing the ball to you, and it's amazing how well-adjusted college students and college faculty become distressed when they don't get the ball tossed to them.
Yo, what the
And
fuck?
So yeah,
Like,
yeah.
pass
I'm right
me-
here,
I'm
dog.
right here, pass me the
I'm
ball.
open.
Wide open.
That's
wide-
hitting on so many different
Yeah.
things because not only is it making you feel excluded, but it's also breaking the pattern that's been established, which is that we return the ball to each
back
other
and
when
forth, yeah.
passed.
And then now you're starting to think like, what did I do something wrong? Did I not
Did I break
pass
the
the
pattern?
ball right?
Exactly.
Like, this happens on a soccer field where we talk about like basketball court. You be playing, all of a sudden people stop passing you the ball, and you're like,
Damn.
I've
Am I not
hard-
playing right?
one mistake,
Yeah.
bro. It's just like I dropped the ball one time. Fucking.
Oh yeah, Colleen High School. I felt the social exclusion with the construction workers who just stopped passing me the ball.
It's like, so,
Had to play in goal to get a touch, baby. That's how I fucked my wrist up.
but dude, this is the thing that I pulled from this that I was like, yo, this is crazy, right? Think about how we use drugs and alcohol and everything too, and nicotine and stuff too. Mostly social. It's
That's-
mostly socially driven.
You
When I
smacked
hear
my head open,
when I
dog.
hear people talk about being like, why do they drink and stuff? It helps them. It's like a social lubricant, right? Like it helps you ease the pain of social interaction. You know, once you get drunk, you're like, fuck it, what's good or whatever. It's that lubricant, and so it's interesting that that's where it starts, and then it becomes like its own negative. Like then all of a sudden he talks about this. He goes in further. We start excluding the drug addicts and stuff. Like you're a drug addict. Like nobody wants to fuck with you.
Yeah.
And then that drives it even more. Of like now you're feeling that insula like firing off from being isolated and socially shunned. That causes you more to want to drink. And then it just
Yes.
Oh man, when it was like, I take it into personal experience quickly, but going on smoke breaks at work. When I quit smoking cigarettes, and the whole night crew, which was a very self-sustained unit, would go smoke. It's like, well now, I'm gonna go with you. So that's why I had a Juul at first, because like I would go with them and I would hit the Juul, because at least I got something,
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where like I would just kind of come out there and hang, but it's like that social exclusion. It's not something that they're meaning to exclude you. It's just that if you don't do the thing everybody else is doing, you are by virtue just excluded in some way.
Yeah.
And
How
so it got to the
funny.
point where I would watch my bosses go smoke, and I'd be like, man, I want a cigarette now because I want to go be part of that little social interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I remember telling you the last couple months before I moved out here, I had quit smoking at this point for like 2 years, but I would just go have a cigarette maybe once a week because I would see I'm losing my value beans.
Right.
Yeah.
My value beans are walking out that door to the fucking smoke corner, and I'm sitting here.
and I'm just smucking it up.
Yeah, I'm not picking up any of those value beans that are out there.
Everybody keeps coming back inside, and everyone
Pockets full
at
of beans.
some point they're going to go out there, and they're gonna say, "Man, John isn't coming out here anymore," and they're
Yeah.
gonna say,
They're gonna
"Maybe
talk
he
about
doesn't
me."
like us anymore,"
Yeah.
and they're gonna feel the same way,
talking about me.
and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
But how interesting is it that we use it to be included, but if you use it too much, then the same group
Will
excludes you.
And
Yes.
excludes you.
If you're that if you drink
smokes
too much or
if
drinks
you get
too
drunk,
much,
stop.
then they're like,
You're so right.
you're gonna have to go somewhere with that, bro. You can't drink that much
so
here.
sloppy, dude.
We're just
Yeah.
doing it socially, bro.
Right.
You got a problem.
You have
then
a problem, Rick.
right? And then it sucks though. But like, it seems to be like that social part of it.
It seems to be very
the thing that
interwoven.
drags you in,
Yeah.
right? And then you even with the mice proved it. If they're in a well knit,
If they're in a well-established community, it is very hard to get them addicted to cocaine, which seems like that would be easy to do. To get a rat addicted to cocaine, that doesn't seem like it should be difficult.
Yeah,
Yeah, it seems like you
boom.
should be very easy to
Yeah.
get a rat addicted to.
Turns
cocaine.
out you have to half starve them and keep them in literally like, what's that? Like isolation. Like, what's it called in prison?
Solitary.
Solitary, or like going in the box or
Yeah.
something. Yeah, like you have to literally do that to them before they're like, all right, give me the cocaine.
All right, I'll take some.
So powerful because I mean it just it points to so many aspects of the whole shebang. How come poor people and people like that tend to be ravaged more by these types of things and everything? Like you said, they're not in these tight knit groups where you trust and communicate well with everybody and your needs are
The
met.
poor communities
you're
are
starved.
yeah,
you're
not
hungry.
Well,
and
because
you're
your life
like,
is
and there's
run
not a
by-
lot of trust.
Your
Yeah.
life is run by the consumption of money. So, like, you know, I'm sure everybody's got that friend where it's like, hey, man, you owe me that $1. Hey, man, like, you know, you said split it, so you owe me that. Like, you know, they're very concerned, and they will ruin a friendship if you do not pay them back what they feel owed, or if you do not share in the proper way. So it's like,
that happens to rich people too.
well, I'm saying, yeah, but I'm saying with poor people, it's like the lack of resources.
Yeah.
Like that can
I
lead
think
to
that
that
drives it.
social
Right.
inclusion, exclusion
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, it's another form of social pain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's another form of just like feeling like you're excluded from everybody. If you see everybody else and they're all living it up, you know,
Everybody's got a
eating,
new phone.
happy, everybody's got a new iPhone. You know, everybody's got Jordans and you don't got shit.
You're excluded
And,
because
you
your
know
lack
what
of
I mean?
Automatically,
That-
yeah.
And then so it's interesting. Like obviously, like you said, I think that there's a genetic component and stuff and whatnot. We pulled some numbers here where it was talking about how, you know, this isn't everybody. So we start socially, but I think that only 10% of people find their way into like an addicted state, you know. But it's interesting, you never know who's
Every year worldwide, alcohol is the cause of 5.3% of deaths.
Yeah, one of the main killers.
One in every
America,
20.
Period. These are statistics on alcohol. Oh, this is addiction.
Almost 21 million Americans have at least one addiction, yet only 10% of them receive treatment. And when we had addiction pulled up as a definition, it was pretty clear. It's the fact or condition of being addicted to a particular substance, thing, or activity.
And I would say that this 21 million number is only accounting for negative,
stuff
drugs
like
and
that.
alcohol and stuff, because like we talked about before, I think
runners
everybody
or-
is addicted
Right.
to something, you know.
Right.
But drug overdoses deaths have more than tripled since 1990.
Which is the war on drugs started in 86?
Like the 80s.
84?
I think that is a point to pharmaceutical companies and the opioid crisis, right?
yeah.
Getting everybody on pain
Availability, too.
Well, the availability shot up through the war on drugs, ironically.
Same with fentanyl, too, with the recent rise. Because with fentanyl, it became so quick and easy to get it off the dark web, and you just get a small amount, and it's really easy to get. And then you cut it all across this. Like, it makes
A
so
bunch
much.
of different drugs, yeah.
I was watching a thing about, like a documentary about fentanyl use.
It's like the
from-
secret drug in all drugs.
Yeah, and they were talking about how the guy was selling it, and he was like, you can get like for like, you know, like $400, you know, you can buy this thing off the dark web, and then you flip that. And she was like, well, how much does this much make and go for? And he was like, you can make like $200,000 off this $400.
Yeah,
And I was
it's
like, holy
ridiculous.
fuck, dude. Like,
Easy
that's
entry,
insane.
easy like reward,
Yeah.
and then of course it comes with the most dire consequence too. It's fascinating.
Yep.
But here's another interesting one. About 20% of Americans who have depression or an anxiety disorder also have a substance use disorder.
Depression and anxiety seem related to social exclusion.
Right. Like, don't all those things seem to work in the same
Tandem.
camp, right?
Yeah, tandem.
And then, like you said, it's hard to point to which one causes which,
Right.
but they're all definitely hanging out with each other.
Yep. I mean, and you can see it, like, it kind of makes me think of, you know, that's why you see encampments of homeless people. They come together, they group together. That's the one thing that they have in common, is that they're all excluded from regular society. And so they group together. That makes their core group. And
which sucks though, that's also predicated on, doing drugs and alcohol.
Exactly, a lot of
together.
drugs, a lot of alcohol, which is unfortunate. It reaffirms
Dude,
the loop that they're in.
This is how you see people spiral down that hole, right? It's like you see how they all like add up on
Yep.
each other, and then you end up homeless on the street. Doing
It reminds
crack with
me a
everybody.
lot about the extremely strong correlation between fatherlessness in the home and the chances of being a criminal, the chances of being incarcerated, the chances of dying from some sort of like being murdered or something like that. Like all of those things, the chances of being in poverty, all of those things increase dramatically by this one factor. Now, again, it's just correlations, but I mean, you have to look at those things. Like that means something. It doesn't mean nothing. It doesn't mean nothing.
You don't have to look at that correlation and say there was a nefarious scheme by white people to lock up black fathers and ruin the lives of black children. That would be taking it to an extreme. But you're right. There is some sort of correlation there. Like,
well, you can. It's not even about black people. That's just about fatherless people in general, just across the board. People.
Yeah, but
fatherless.
based on
at least in America, the studies.
Based on demographics, it's just that affects minorities much more than it affects.
That's true. It does affect minorities.
I had another thing too on this with these numbers. This was from 1999 to 2017. More than 700,000 Americans died from overdosing on a drug. So let me ask you guys: have you known anybody who's ever overdosed on a drug? Probably
not personally. No.
Okay,
Not
like
anybody who's
it's
ever
affected me. Like we were living at
passed
a guy's house, and like there was a party, and a kid that was like one of the sisters.
Yeah.
So it's affected
I mean, I'm
me.
only
I've
like
had
one or
people-
two people removed from knowing somebody.
Alcohol poisoning. I've known people who've gotten it, but I've never known anybody who's died.
Okay, and so my point I wanted to make. I read that, and the first thing my mind jumped to is I don't know anybody that's died from coronavirus. But if you look at this, is just America, right? Americans. Worldwide, I guess it's a different number. It's like 1.3 million. But in America, we're at what 250,000 deaths.
Yeah.
So in only like 300 days of it being out there. So it's kind of we're getting to that point where it's like that's only 250,000 in 300 days. If that number continues to go up or whatever like that,
we'll
like,
blow that out of the water.
Yeah, and because this is only 700,000 in 18 years,
like
that jumped off the page at me. I was like, I would have thought because of how closely I've seen it affect so many people in my life that the overdose numbers would be 21 million or 22 million or something like that in 18 years.
Yeah.
Like I was envisioning so much more death.
But
overdose.
the overdose actually is it's obviously you don't want to have one, but the chances of you dying from one are not relatively high, and it also varies a lot by what drug you're overdosing on, and also if there's anybody around.
It doesn't take in
Now,
alcohol
because of the
over
fact
your lifetime and stuff.
that's true.
Yeah, that's true.
And because of the fact that drugs, we do know that drugs tend to be done socially, at least up until a point, until you get to like really like I guess rock bottom, where you're just like in an alley by yourself somewhere. But like you tend to do them with other people even when you're already addicted, and so even when you're overdosing, people around you can tell that you're not doing well, and they'll just drop you off at a hospital or whatever.
Yeah, sometimes.
So that's probably, those are two probably big reasons that I would say that maybe that's why that number's not so high, because I also, like when you said it, I was like, well, that doesn't sound right. That's a lot of years, and that's not that many people.
But like you said, sudden deaths from overdose and stuff, that's not including like how many people die from just alcohol-related diseases and
34.2 million in 1 year committed DUI
stuff.
in America. That's a huge-ass number.
Right, because that's the thing.
Now, that has affected me personally.
Well, that's what I was going to get to, too, in the sense of like have overdose deaths. Not necessarily, but we all know somebody who's
Drug-induced deaths?
or drug addicted. Like we all know
Definitely.
somebody who's addicted or somebody who's like,
Yeah, because they don't consider,
Got
like, if you
DUI.
get shot trying to steal something to make money to pay for your drugs, they don't consider that a drug death.
Yeah.
They
That's
consider that.
not an opium death.
Yeah. So that it's like the numbers are skewed, because I would consider that an opium death. Like you wouldn't be in that woman's house or the person's house robbing them for money to pay for your drugs if you weren't addicted to drugs.
Yeah, and this is
Now
philosophically.
you might be in there for something else, but
And this is another thing too about addiction too, is it's like to what extent is the person making the choice? Like when you become addicted and
right.
you get along this trajectory,
right.
like at what point are you blaming?
Yes.
Always you assign some blame to the person,
Yeah.
but at what point do you start saying like, man, alcohol really took over his life, or
right.
his addiction to this thing
Is
really
out of
took over,
control
is out of
or
control.
something. Because
Like we say it in those terms, in that language, because we look at it like a monster who's taken over someone's mind and made them
Like
act
a
away.
possession.
Like a possession, like a demon. Yeah. So it's just interesting because
That is an interesting question.
when you think about it philosophically, it really starts affecting your political culture.
Well, I think of it in general, dude. Like addiction is so such a powerful topic to me in that sense, because it is all this psychology. And like you said, where does it start? Where, like you said, where's the tip over the scale where it's like, I'm doing this socially, but now this is doing me socially, you know? Like, where does it become that thing where you're just now, because somebody said it about eventually you spiral into that part where you're just out in the alley somewhere just doing it, and it has nothing to do with anybody else who's around or anything.
It literally just has to do with you being alive.
Well, you just getting that response, like you just now trigger. It's like smoking. After a while, you don't know why you smoke. You don't like do it like, ooh, a cigarette would be good right now. You just go. What you doing? Go smoke. You know, that's what I do. I just go and I smoke. And it does become kind of almost subconscious after a while, where you're just, because I think about that too, man. You can you ever just tell someone, hey man, you're addicted? Like you look like, me? Nah. What?
Yeah.
Nah, man, you drink too.
I think it takes a lot of self-reflection to be able to be like, wow,
It's crazy.
yeah, I'm addicted
I have an
to
issue to this.
I have an issue with this.
Yeah.
Because some people will be, it feels like we're addicted to so many things on such a spectrum of levels. Like we're addicted to sugars in our foods. We're addicted to caffeine. We're addicted to physical
Social
exertion,
media.
social media, all these other things, like other than drugs. But it's on a spectrum of health versus risk, those type of things.
Right.
And with some drugs, like, you're weighing it in your head differently than other people. Some people look at marijuana and they weigh it in such a way, they're like, look at all these risks. I mean, lung cancer and all this other stuff. And then some people who have like insane anxiety or something, look at it and it's their crutch. And they're like, oh, I have to smoke weed to calm down or to go to sleep or to do, it gives me this wonderful,
my
beautiful
Insula to
benefit.
bed.
Or with someone who actually has physical, like seizures, the weed might be the only thing. So they're taking like a pill that doesn't get them too fucked up. So it's like these weird spectrums of adverse effects versus benefits. And when you look at something that's a hard drug, it's a lot easier to look at somebody and be like, you have a fucking problem. Like, if you're taking heroin all the time and you're like, yeah, it just calms me down. Like, no, you got a fucking problem, buddy. You're taking heroin and falling asleep on a hardwood floor.
But it's interesting though. But where do you draw that line though? You know, because like me as a libertarian, like, you know, where I don't think of that in the sense of like anybody else gets to make that decide. Like, I don't know.
Maybe it's like obscenity, you know?
Be
like when you see it, you know it. You know, that kind of
I
thing.
think, like you said, it's a self-choice. Like, you have to decide. Like, I can't decide for somebody else that their addiction. Because here's the thing: we're not debating on whether or not you're addicted. It is, right? Yeah. But we're not. You are addicted. You're addicted. You're addicted to something. You, me,
hey,
are addicted.
Look at us.
Like, I'm addicted to coffee.
Look at me.
You're addicted
You are
to
addicted.
something.
Hey, what's that line?
You are.
Look at me. Look at me. You are addicted now.
You
We
are addicted
though,
now.
right? Well, we all are. We all are. We talked about this from the start. Some people are addicted to running. Some people. I'm addicted to coffee. Like, I know that for a fact. Like, I seek coffee out. I feel the pull on me.
Your morning does not feel right without it.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, I now obviously I could probably break that. And like we said, there's degrees to this shit, but I think you're the only one that can look at your addictions, whatever they may be, and say, is this a detriment to me or am I doing good? Because
across the entire realm too.
Because you see
your
some
actions you're addicted to, your substances you're addicted to, all those things.
You have to be the person to decide, because people love to judge that guy down on the street corner all the time and be like, look at this dude, he's just a fucking drug addict on the road and this, and I'm like, that's a life. I mean, it's no better or worse life than the life you're choosing to live. Like, what the fuck makes you so much cooler
let me
than this
take
guy?
away your streaming movies you're addicted to and see how you fucking
see
survive
how you
the night.
act. And so it's I mean, I could look at it from my socioeconomic status and my place and my decisions in life and say, you're a fuck up because you chose this way.
Yep.
But anybody could do that to anybody. You know, it's like you have to, I think it's only you.
Let
that can
he
really
who
decide.
cast the first stone be without sin.
Yeah, which is
Facts.
Yeah.
Which means
pretty
don't
much
throw no
don't
fucking
stone.
stones,
Don't throw no
bitch.
fucking stones. That means put them
That's
stones
what that
in your
means.
pockets.
That's what that means if you don't habla religious text.
Yeah. If you don't speak King James English, let me put it very
Put
plain
your
for
stones
you.
back in your
Don't throw no
pocket.
fucking stones.
Yeah. Fucking stone ass.
stoner ass.
Fucking stone throwing ass motherfuckers. Yeah.
But I think that's how, like, for me personally, that's how I think the lines are drawn. I think that we like have these conversations about how the lines should be drawn and where they should be drawn. But I think if you look at the way people do it, they're doing it either consciously or subconsciously, and they're not. Like, if they're doing it consciously, then they're drawing a line. And if they're doing it subconsciously, then there is no line because they're not even aware of it.
Right.
So I think what it is like when, like, I do still consider myself addicted to marijuana. Yeah. Like, I crave it all the time. Like, I like it. And I did that whole 30-day sobriety challenge. And, like, it was hard at first, and then it got easier. And at the end, I didn't really feel like I wanted to smoke all that much. But then I smoked a little bit, and I was like, oh, that's right. Yeah, I do remember. Like, I like this a lot. And now I'm kind of back to smoking like I used to. And but it's not hurting me in any way that I can tell. Like, if I start running out of money and having to steal things, then it becomes an issue for me.
Or if you just can't pay your bills.
Exactly. Because I just be like buying weed all the goddamn time. Like I think now, it's a funny story. I'll tell a personal story. When I first got off my parents' phone plan was many years after I had moved out of the house. But my mom was definitely afraid that I was not going to pay my phone in lieu of buying other things such as marijuana. And she was absolutely correct, because literally the very next month after I got my phone plan, I didn't have enough money for my weed and my phone plan. And she was trying to call me, and I did not have my phone turned on. Now, that would not happen. Like, I would pay the phone bill because I use my phone for much more. Like, I'm using it for work now. Back in the day, I worked at some whatever job, and I just used my phone for looking at dumb shit. So I was like, whatever. I got dumb shit on my Xbox, and so
I think it was back to what you were saying about value or something, like
Cost
you have to
benefit
cost
analysis.
benefit analysis. Yeah, I think everybody's line is drawn where they are when they're consciously aware of their actions and then decide this is fucking me up too much. And so that's the hard part, though, is that addiction tends to be subconscious. You tend to not be aware that you're addicted. That's the point that we're trying to highlight, is that you are addicted, so you need to figure out what it is that you're addicted to and how it's affecting your life, because it might not be that bad. Some people are addicted to collecting figurines, and that could be ruining them. Or you might be like a famous dude that does interviews all over the world because you got like the biggest whatever figurine collection,
and we can't really measure internally like that happiness that each figurine
how it works. Like if I
of
throw this away, how is it gonna affect you?
Yeah, I can't describe to you what it feels like to crack open a pack of Magic cards and get that foil mythic rare in the back, and you're like,
oh no, we know, we know Pokemon cards for us, but we know.
Okay, yeah, so you understand.
But for the readers, it's
isn't
glorious.
It interesting? Like that's
listeners.
It's all that chemical little knick-knack in your brain.
Yep.
We're all trying to hit that little
chemical
button.
knick-knack.
We're all trying to get that little chemical snack, you know, and we get it from something. But I think that's it's you. You're the only one that can decide, because for me, like my experience of marijuana, opposite, right? Or same, but in a different realm. Like, again, no detriment to me per se. You know, it's not like by social standards, it's not like a detriment to me. Like I can function. I'm still paying my bills. I'm a happy-go-lucky guy, but I started noticing, like, dang, you know, like it had control over me, and I didn't like that. Like that's been my thing over the years. Like I don't like things making me do shit I wouldn't normally do. You know, like I didn't like the fact that I wasn't okay. Let's talk about the morning, right? That drives me nuts. The fact that I have to have that coffee or else my morning's fucked up. Like in that way, that thing has this kind of like power over
running
me.
around the house looking for a bowl.
You know
like
what I'm saying?
You're out of
like,
weed.
Dude,
you're like, I gotta
cut all of these little joint roaches open and harvest
like,
the crusty weed.
What's wrong with you, man? Why you got a sourpuss face on? It's like, I'm gonna get smoked on weed today, man. Fuck, you know.
Don't talk to me, man. I'm not high yet.
This is a bad mood, man. Just don't talk to me.
And then, so it's like in that little bit of cost was like too high of a cost for me, because I'm trying to like reach this place where I didn't want those things on me. But all again, personal choice. Like it's like you can easily sit there and argue that. I would argue the opposite too. I'd be like, it's really not that big a deal. So
it's just coffee.
You know what I'm saying?
It's just a cup of coffee.
Dude, I literally had to do that. People were like, dude, coffee's okay, and I'm like, for you don't know my life. I don't like being addicted to coffee. But it's weird, dude. We're all suffering from it. But I think that if you look at it that way, it helps you remove that stone. Like take that stone out of your hand, because that's something I do see a lot in society and something that I think was pointed to with that whole thing about us shunning these people for this loop that we put them in. First of all, let's start there. It's a social thing. Like, didn't nobody just pick up a pack of cigarettes? Somebody handed you a cigarette. Like a friend of yours, a person, you saw your mama, but somebody else introduced you to the idea. So we introduce each other to these things, and then if you go off the rails with it, then we say, like you said, oh, Joe so-and-so fucked it up. They're too far off the rails. Get away from them. And then it's like he should get locked up, or he should, you know, he's a bad dude now because he went off the rails. Or
I want to say this. One of the worst addictions I feel I've ever had to an action or a reciprocated thing rather than a substance is getting affection from females. Like female attention and affection, social inclusion. Like, you know me enough to know me well enough to know that was my drug. Like if I got some of that, it could completely change how I act. It's like a demon possessing me. And like I used to make all sorts of jokes about it, about how like women have some sort of mind control chemicals inside of their vaginas. pussy power, all these funny jokes, right? But I cut that out about 3 years ago to the point where it's like I made a decision in my life that I would never, ever let someone else's opinion of me affect my opinion of myself or my actions. And that kind of broke it for me, because every change I had ever made in my life that was major, like quitting weed. I never quit weed for myself, but I quit it for girls. I quit it for pussy multiple times and hated the feeling and knew personally on my level I was going to smoke again eventually, whether it was with her or not.
It was like waiting.
It was just a wait. It was like a break.
Matter of time.
It was just a matter of time. And like I can imagine someone addicted.
Spell over me wears off.
And I can imagine someone who's addicted to something like alcohol that could be a little more destructive than marijuana, feeling that and just knowing I'm going to go back. Like you're changing me now because the addiction to your affection is bigger than the addiction to the alcohol. And like, so if I had to think about something, like I'm addicted to plenty of stuff. I smoke weed every day. Like, addiction is a thing. I'm addicted to social media. I'm addicted to these other things. But if I had to look at something that I broke inside of myself that I feel was an incredibly bad addiction, it would be the addiction of their affection and their attention. That's why when I'm around someone, I don't really act differently anymore. I've kind of shed that and taken that off my shoulders, because I don't care. Someone out there is going to love me exactly how I'm acting. And I don't have to change anything about how I'm acting. I don't have to spit game. I don't have to text you all the fucking time. I don't have to quit smoking weed. I don't have to not play video games and pay attention to you. All these other things that I, selfishly, look at myself and want to do and am addicted to, I'm just not going to let anybody change that anymore. It's not going to do that anymore.
A lot of people do make that choice, though.
Some people, I might be a cat lady for the rest of my life, too. But I'm saying, like, but the addiction is broken. I feel the addiction is broken. I'm going to go back to pussy eventually. Don't worry, ladies. But I broke the addiction.
The man's coming back.
Does not control me anymore.
I think it was powerful. You said you replaced it, though. Like you didn't really break it. You replaced it. That's what a lot of people do. Like you said, heroin addicts or drug addicts will often turn to a runner's high, and they'll become addicted to running. And it's like
it's a more constructive addiction.
It's a more constructive addiction, but you have to do something with that, like energy, I guess.
Right. Well, and I think what you guys were both describing was that you have set up you have decided on an internal image of the ideal you, like what the ideal you would look like. For you, it's an authentic you, someone who doesn't compromise themselves for anybody else, which is very much so in line with me. For Rod, it sounded like your ideal involved someone who had control over these things and didn't let it bother them whether or not it happened or not. Like just someone who could control their cravings. And so that's kind of the idea of having conscious addictions, is like you're aware of them and you're striving to an ideal where you overcome them, knowing that it may take you your entire life to get there, considering the fact, I mean, who reaches their ideal? I mean, you know what I mean? But like, it's something to strive for. Whereas, exactly. Yeah. It's some sort of like self-rehabilitation. Now, sometimes your problem is so bad that you need some help. Yeah. And you need to go talk to somebody else. Because maybe you're not equipped to do the things that you need to do. Like, luckily, we've been able to study psychology and addiction and biology and stuff like that very minimally, just over the years, just consuming things we were interested in. And so now we were able to get to a point where we were like, you know what? I can work out. We conceptualized a way to get around those problems, but not everybody is in that situation, and we have to be aware of that. Sometimes
I had to read a book. I had to read a book to quit smoking. You know what I mean? Like that. That was
well, that's what I'm saying. The information is what we use. Sometimes you need somebody else.
Or like, but like, dude, I kept thinking, man, I would love to go to a place where they just kept me away from it. Like I'd already made the conscious decision that I wanted to quit, but like you said, being around the stimulus still and all these different things that can, because after a while,
the Vipassana.
I wanted to go on a break. I was gonna use Vipassana to do it, but even still, like I felt weird. Like I was like, who am I? Be like, I'm really gonna go to rehab for smoking cigarettes. You know what I mean? But like at the same time, I would have loved to have a service like that though, because I had already made the conscious decision. I think we talked about earlier. You can't really force people into rehab, because it's like they don't want to be there. So
they sabotage it.
They're not gonna use it as a tool to help themselves. But it's nice having those tools. Sometimes you do need to get help sometimes, because somebody else was talking, but it's just, dude, after a while it pulls on you. Like that craving is a real thing, and it's hard to fight against it. Like you were saying earlier, you can, but as we all know, when you said like when you first quit smoking or something, like it's tough to sometimes,
depending on what you're, if you're too addicted to heroin, then you can't just fight your
Right.
way out of it.
Your
Like, you're
body
literally
will
so
flip the fuck
like
out.
there's plenty of people. I had to go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings when I got caught at school with marijuana. And I remember listening to these people talk about it, and it was like so eye-opening. It was my first experience with any sort of like addict, you know, like I had never really been around those people. Like I was raised in a middle-class family.
Sure.
And so hearing them talk about, like, they would literally describe how they were so gone that if they hated themselves every time they went to go get the heroin and they went to inject themselves, but if they didn't, they were gonna die.
Yeah.
Like, they had tried plenty of times, and they were like, I got to the point where I knew, like, I was convulsing on the ground, vomiting blood. If I don't do this heroin, I will die. So they just have to. And it's like they hate themselves for being in that position, but they don't know a way out. Like, they're like, what am I supposed to do? I'm between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it, but if I don't, I'll die.
Yeah.
And I want to live.
You
Want to live more than you want to not do heroin.
Yeah.
So you will do heroin just to
it's
live.
a trap. It's a trap because you get to a point where you need something to keep you alive, to get you through the recovery. So
literally
methadone, all this other stuff.
Right.
Because your body creates such a dependence on it.
It's a dependency issue.
And I think that's the stark difference between like action and substance addictions, is that like I think they can both be detrimental. Like, they both have very high pain floors, if you will. They can both be very bad for you, but the ceiling on a substance abuse, depending on the substance, is so much higher than like you could be addicted to shopping and make yourself extremely poor and maybe like end up on drugs, I guess, but then the drugs will make you need the drugs to live, whereas like you don't need to buy a dress to live.
A lot of those other things are mental, right? And then that becomes a
physical addiction, right?
Yeah, physical dependence and mental is another great way to
because like you said, it's not
differentiate.
really like you get addicted to shopping like on a physical level.
That's
like,
true. You get addicted to like like
same
the
for
dopamine
marijuana.
you
They
get
talk
from
about
getting the new thing.
They talk about how marijuana is not a physical addiction as well. They talk about it being how it's a mental addiction. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Yeah, because when people always say, "Well, you can't get addicted to marijuana," I'm like,
"Oh, you can."
No, you're definitely.
Yeah.
Like I
know there's actually
sat there and been like you said, like I'm low key addicted to this shit.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, if I remove that from me, it's not like I felt like I was
withdrawals.
convulsing.
Yeah, you're not having
or,
withdrawals
like,
physically.
No, but
like
you do though. But you
physical-
do. They're just not like comparatively as
Right.
intense as like
That's
a
so
heroin.
true, too.
Like, you could have withdrawals. Like,
You'll have
I know
no
when I
appetite.
quit, it was extremely
I
difficult
could
for me
not
to eat anything
for like 3 days.
It's extremely difficult for me to go to sleep.
Yep.
And also, as another side effect, it's not really like a negative, but it dampens your REM sleep. So I was having more dreams when I wasn't smoking. And that's been something that's gone away again as I've continued.
That might be where all I had. Remember I was telling you I started having all these crazy dreams and I couldn't figure out where it had
I
come
didn't
from,
know this,
I
but
think
somebody was telling me, like, I was like, oh yeah, I don't dream, and they were like, it's probably all that weed you smoke, and I was like, what would that have anything to do with it?
Yeah.
They were like, it depresses REM sleep, which is when you dream, and I was like, oh, which I don't like because REM sleep's important. It's like not just for dreaming and having little fairy tales when you're sleeping. Like, that's just important. Your brain's doing something so complicated that we don't understand what it's doing yet. So I think we should take that importantly. But damn, that weed.
I find it more so that I don't remember my dreams for as long.
That's possible.
And I also I feel like I still dream because I still will wake up and remember dreams. Like, I remembered when we were walking down the stairs today to bring Dinger down. I was like, I remembered a piece of a dream randomly from this morning, and it's like I was really fucking high last night when I went to bed.
Well, there's so many different factors that go into that. Like, you genetically might be able to get more REM sleep at night than I do.
But the point I wanted to make,
base,
the point I wanted to make was like one of the things that helped me with my nightmare situation and my panic attacks, and I was having a lot of those when I was in the relationships where I couldn't smoke weed. I found that smoking weed before bed really helped me not have those episodes, or I would have them less frequently. I went from something that would happen once a month to something that just didn't happen very often at all, like once a year or once every 6 months, and then so it is a bit of a dependency.
Like we talked about even still too, like a lot of people turn to alcohol to satiate that social
anxiety.
You know what I mean? And then that in itself becomes like the thing that
makes you want to do it,
right?
And then you do it to make, and that
right,
doing it
and
makes
then like,
you
well,
want to do
why?
it more.
And then when somebody says, well, why you drink so much? You're like, you don't understand, man. It's like it helps me with this.
Yeah, it's like a different
XYZ.
angle to the dream thing because you were saying like dampening it dampens your REM sleep. So when you don't do it, you get these nice, beautiful, vivid dreams. And I'm like, I don't want those nice, beautiful, vivid dreams though. I want to dampen that shit as much as possible.
I mean, that's true. It's the only thing I would say. I mean, I don't know much about dreams. It's just that
Physical
other
health.
than that not very many people in the world know much about dreams, which leads me to believe that there's something very complex at work happening
Facts.
rather than something so simple that it doesn't need explaining.
I mean, it's
But
definitely
that's just my own internal, like I always assume that, like instead of thinking that it's so dumb that I'm so above it, I usually think that I'm so dumb that it's like
You don't
completely
get it.
above my head.
Mm-hmm.
Just take like the humble road. But I think that one thing that I do, like, I love that you talked about the fact that it brought you satiation or like relief from those night terrors.
Yeah.
It did the same thing for me with, I mean, I presume it's hard to tell because there's so many variables, but when I was younger, I was diagnosed with chronic migraines.
Yeah.
And then when around the age when I started smoking weed is when they went away.
Yeah.
And I haven't had them since. I've had one serious migraine since I started smoking weed. But I was also putting my body through a lot during that time. So it's interesting how the things that we become addicted to oftentimes are things that relieve something in the beginning.
Yeah.
You take it to relieve the pain.
Yes.
And then in the end, it becomes the pain.
Exactly.
Opium.
Exactly. That's the segue. I was going to totally go into the fact that opioids, when we talked about earlier, I'm like reading over here and I'm like, yeah, see, they got statistics on opioid addiction. And then how that shot up in the 1990s. They said in 2017 alone, there was 2 million people who misused prescription opioids for the first time. That's just in 2017. More people got addicted or used opioids for the first time than we've ever had coronavirus cases or number or
deaths worldwide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So but point is, those opioids, that's a drug. That's Valium, that's Xanax, that's Oxycontins.
Yeah.
These are all supposed to be something that relieve a pain for you, and then they become the pain.
Yep.
It's so fascinating, man. It's so fascinating how that is the play. You know?
Yeah, because the pipeline of Oxycontin and all these other prescription drugs to heroin and fentanyl, that's the pipeline.
Oh, it's slow to right now.
People used to say marijuana is the gateway drug, and it's like, no, aspirin.
Tylenol
Is the gateway drug. That's the thing. You start fucking, like taking what's that nasal spray, the Afrin, the one you can get high from.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's
They had to ban that shit from pilots using it.
I didn't know you could get high from that.
Yeah, that's why pilots couldn't use it in the military, to my understanding.
Wow, crazy. Didn't know that.
Because it was like a fake Coke. It was like a little Coke burst. You're like, let's go.
It's crazy too, because it's like you could do that. Like we're so crazy as a species. Like we try everything. You can get high off of sniffing glue. How'd you figure that out? I mean, we had to invent glue first.
How'd they figure out how to huff poo? Do you remember what it was called? It was essentially they figured out a way to use human excrement and to collect gas from it and to get high from it.
I never did that.
So people in Iraq and Afghanistan got busted cooking up poo gas
That's crazy.
to get high.
That's crazy.
Yeah, 100%, bro.
Poo gas.
Jenkem. There it is.
Jenkem.
Yep. A hallucinogen.
Is an inhalant and hallucinogen created from fermented human waste.
In the mid-90s.
It was reported to be a popular street drug among Zambian street children.
God damn.
Which they had a ton of poo laying around.
Well, yeah.
Zambians, they just realized.
You seal it, leave it out to ferment in the sun, and then you inhale the fumes. So you just,
You just bake poop,
Yep.
and then you sniff that shit, and it will fuck you up, supposedly.
What the fuck?
Gotta know if they tricked me or not. Because if it's fake and they never caught anybody in the army doing it, I've sullied the good name. The Museum of Hoaxes, that's not good for me. We heard like, somebody got busted making Jenkem, like some shit like that, and I was like, damn, somebody was making poo balloons.
Wait, you do them out of balloons?
That's what it said.
Some people do.
Oh, so you dump in a balloon and then you tie it off and just leave it in the sun and it inflates, and then you just come by and you just sniff at it.
Well, they said like a bag too. I just think anything to seal the gases in while
like a
they,
Ziploc
cook,
bag.
while it cooks.
Oh
and
my
it
God.
releases some type of special methane that you.
Hey, I wonder if there's people in like Zambia that be like sitting on the step or whatever, and like you just be talking, chatting it up with your homies.
Shit
and then
into
all
a
of a sudden,
balloon.
Nah, you're cooking it, right? You're cooking it. You're just chilling, sipping some piss or whatever. I don't know.
Whatever you take
I don't know.
when you're
Hey, you're
sniffing
just chilling, and all of a sudden you just hear, "Oh shit! I think my Jacob busted."
Oh,
I'm just thinking like if you took a too big of a shit in too small of a bag and
like
like
fuck up the cooking of
explodes,
it.
and you're like, damn it, bro, that was all of our Jacob.
I was
sure
trying
if
to
this
think
is
about
real.
how much Jenkem goes for. I'm like, that can't be a very
Like, you
expensive.
sell
product.
it?
Producing Jenkem?
Like,
Is that a hustle?
It's like just the purest Jenkem you can get on the market.
Yeah, Jenkem is fascinating.
Jenkem is a fascinating.
I mean,
topic.
I've gotten high on gas before. I've huffed gas. You know, I've huffed spray paint. I've gotten fucked up.
I
on a
retract
bunch
my
of weird
statements.
things.
It may or may not have been done by American soldiers while
I'm sure
deployed
there
to
have.
Iraq.
I'm sure that there's.
I mean, I'm
definitely
sure at least
US
one
soldiers
American soldier has
has
done some Jenkem.
Jenkem.
Just cook some
100%. Yeah, it's
Cooking up some
got the
yeah.
recipe off Reddit. Decided
Yeah.
to cook up an Iraqi mud bomb.
I mean, hey, shit.
But it's interesting that the opioids, though, and like you said, like it's not about getting high, though. Like, you know, you think of this thing as like, oh, people are trying to get fucked up and stuff, but there's a scenario where you could just be sitting. I think Jordan Peterson
Pain.
is probably this very
the benzos,
aspect, right? It's like you start and you take one. It's a painkiller, right? And you take one, but then it doesn't kill your pain, right? And so you think, just take another one, right? Like, no big deal, no harm, no foul. Now it works, and now you're up to 2. Now you take 2 for your pain, right? But then now it's like all of a sudden that pain keep creeping back in. You're like, dang,
That's how people get addicted.
and you just fall down this really slippery slope till next thing you know, middle-aged, white man fucking strung out on fentanyl. You know what I mean? It's like cisgendered male white man. It's like he just fell down that rabbit hole. It's not, I'm saying it's not like only poor people are gonna get addicted to crack, or only these types of people get fucked up and that type of shit. It's like it's not necessarily about people trying to get fucked up all the times. Like I said, sometimes you just go to a party and you're around a bunch of people and they want to do heroin, and you feel like
Maybe you're trying to impress these people.
I've almost done heroin based off of this very thing about just somebody was like, yo, you want to do this? And everybody's like, yeah, I'm about to go in. And there's other people, and I was like, should I just go in? I mean, everybody else. And I was like, yeah, probably shouldn't go in.
Probably.
I did meth just because I was bored.
Yeah.
So it's like,
facts. Yeah, dude. Same scenario. I got into meth from the same exact scenario of like I was hanging out at this crazy house. I wasn't hanging out. I was homeless at the time. I was couch surfing on my way to being homeless, and I ended up at a house where these guys would like knock off places and then turn it into drugs. Right? They would like break into houses and stuff, and it was just like that. It was like a social thing. It was just like, yo, you want to come with us? Sure.
It sounds like
And
a
then-
crack house.
Yeah, I go and I just stand outside and I watch them break into these houses. I'm like, oh, that's crazy. Y'all breaking into these houses. That's nuts, you know? And then they go back and they be like, this is what we got. You want to try some? Sure. You know what I'm saying? Like, what's it do? Yeah, it's fun. It's great. It's going to have a good time. All right, cool. Next thing you know, this close to being addicted to meth. Like, I was lucky that I think that this is one of the most profound things I've learned from this whole thing was the interaction between these substances and social, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I joined the military, and in the military, I had a chance to quit. My first roommate in the military addicted to meth. Like, addicted to meth, dude. So he's literally, like, doing meth every day. And he's like, you want to do some meth? And I'm like, I used to do meth, you know?
it's not really anything new for me.
This isn't new territory. I'm perfectly fine with
Let's
this.
do some meth. And then so next thing you know, I'm doing meth with him all the time. This is in the military too, bro. This is pre-soldier of the year me. I'm almost meth head, get kicked out of the army guy. And so I'm doing meth every day, and we're like,
oh, how the turntables,
dude. I'm draining my bank account, like just completely. Like I would be broke 3 days after we got paid, like instantly. Just go and we spend all our money on
getting paid on the first, broke by the third.
So I'm well down my way of this spiral down out of control. The roommate gets popped, right, and he ends up going to jail and doing all that stuff. He's like ends up in a bad way. And then I just stopped doing meth because I could never really get it. Like he was the plug, like his guy was the plug. I didn't really interact or hang with anybody else. I didn't really have no way to get it, and I don't remember going through this like ridiculous withdrawal process or anything. I just remembered me just like not fucking with it anymore because I couldn't get it. I remember thinking like, ooh, it'd be nice to get some meth right now, but I couldn't, and so then I just like,
oh well,
yeah.
Guess I better go do these push-ups.
Yeah, I go hang out with
That's
everybody
funny.
else.
Guess I better go do these push-ups.
Go hang.
What else? I mean, they're yelling at me if I don't do them.
Just go hang out with other motherfuckers who didn't, and so it's really fascinating.
Yeah, I had a
like
couple
that.
bad influences get pulled away from me in the army where I was, I remember my very first night at Fort Hood and I got raided where I was like my little temporary barracks and ninja stars, some sort of like knife that pops out.
Oh, an
fucking all
OTF
this,
knife.
Like all this crazy shit that I would like got in trouble for like right off the bat.
Yeah.
And it was because my boy was already there from back home at Fort Hood.
Yeah.
And I spent that first night with him.
Yeah.
And he gave me all that crazy shit. He's like, hey, you want some brass knuckles? I'm like, hell yeah, I want some brass knuckles.
That sounds awesome.
And then like he was eventually, you know, within 2 or 3 months kicked out or gone or whatever. But there was a time period there when I first got to Hood where it was like, I remember taking a girl over to his barracks to smoke a blunt with him and his boy in his barracks room.
Yeah.
While they were watching Chappelle's show
Yeah.
on DVD.
Oh my
and
God.
I'm just like, and I'm like trying to pass it to her, and she's like,
Absolutely not.
and I'm like, you know, and I'm just doing it myself. Oh man, it was wild, bro. He was
Yeah.
getting ecstasy and shit.
Yeah.
It was
so crazy.
and like once he got snatched up, or I remember,
Yeah.
you know, something happened between me and him where it just made me realize like I don't want to be like that.
Right.
Yeah.
right,
You know,
right,
I think it
right.
was something about like he came by my barracks and was like,
Right.
yo, let me know if you see anything shiny or something like that. And I remember thinking to myself, like, you really about to come into my barracks
Mm-hmm.
and steal from my peers to
Why
feed
would
your
you?
habits?
Yeah.
Why don't you steal from your friends?
Yeah, right.
You know, but it was like, it just felt scummy.
It
So I
is.
was like, you know, it made me step back from it and be like, okay, I don't need to be smoking and shit, because I was getting in my Jetta with homeboy in the fucking passenger seat and another guy in the back smoking a blunt, listening to 36 Chambers.
Yeah.
You know, like we were
Yeah.
doing that fucking West Fort Hood freestyling.
Yeah,
that
it-
first
on
month I was
base.
or two that I was in the army
That's
at Fort
insane.
Hood was
Wild.
insane.
Yeah, that's
I
insane.
was wiling out.
Mhm.
And later on it became Spice, where it was undetectable and things like
Yeah,
that, and I fucked around with other drugs. But just like that first, like you're saying, that first, it's so wild that those experiences are mirrored somewhat. Where
And it's the influence. Though,
it's
right?
the influence, yeah. Like
yeah.
both times I smoked with two different guys was two guys who both got kicked out of the army.
Yeah.
Same thing for me though. That's so funny. Like I got started smoking weed by a guy who ended up dropping out of high school like 6 months into my freshman year. He was like a junior. And he dropped out and just moved out of his parents' house, which was right down the street from my house. So I didn't see him again anymore. And then the meth guy got fired from my job, which is how I knew him. And so we didn't see him anymore either. And it was just like
Proximity.
exactly. But I think it highlights the point that, like, especially what you were talking about in your story, like we hadn't gotten to that point where it was like we knew a guy we could get it from or anything like that. Like you'd only done it like maybe 50 times or whatever. And like I only did it twice. So it was
Social
like,
inclusion.
yeah, it was like
That's what sucked you in.
at a certain point you're like forced out of the bubble
Yeah.
and you're like, well,
Then it changes.
guess I gotta do something else, you know, like it, you know.
Changes the whole thing. But that's why, like, when obviously we're gonna talk about the war on drugs, and we talk about it right now, honestly. But you know, I hate when people talk about that in the sense of, okay, we can argue all day of how the crack got into the black neighborhoods, right? Like, I don't know if the government went and dropped it off by the caseload or if they just started finding it because it was cheap. I don't know. But the point is,
Somebody cooked it
it
up.
gets in there, and then now that it's in there, it's so like the kids just constantly get it perpetuated onto them. Like your OG, your big brother, the person you're looking up
Monetary value in the gangs.
Right,
It became
exactly. The
most
big money,
lucrative thing.
right? Exactly. Whatever. But other people around you, that's what they're doing, and they're training you, teaching you, bribing you, just socially including you. And it's so easy for them to get caught up into it. You pointed to it earlier. You said, I've never been around people like that. I grew up middle class. I thought the same thing too. It's like we grew up in a place where our family was together. We did have a tight-knit social inclusion like type deal where, you know, you couldn't really fall out like that. And
People were looking out for you.
right, people were looking out
People
for
weren't,
you.
and it's not
That's
like they
so
weren't
true.
trying to look out for you. They just like when you have 4 children being raised by one person and they work 2 jobs, maybe 3 jobs and side hustles, they literally just cannot look out for you.
Yeah.
You have to look out for yourself. And so you end up on the streets and then the only people that look out for you on the streets are people from the streets.
Yeah.
So you just hang in with those people.
Which, like, we talk
and
about
then what do those
drugs
people
and
do?
alcohol are running
Drugs and
rampant
alcohol.
in the streets, you know?
Think about this too. Like I grew up in a family and a household where every single person smoked cigarettes and they all smoked indoors. So it was like predetermined to
Yeah.
a certain aspect that I was gonna at least try them.
Yeah.
Of course.
Oh
Right?
yeah, right.
Yeah.
That
I
you
mean,
were
it
at
was
least
just
down.
there, and that was the struggle for me starting at 11 or 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was starting so young, and like you see it in like the 60s and 70s and the 80s too, where it's all over your culture and your television.
Yep.
Like I saw a recent famous scene from a movie where the guy's fucking offered. It's a dialogue scene. They were talking about dialogue and how realistic it was, and the guy like comes up, he offers the guy a cigarette, and the guy goes, "He's holding one already." He's like, oh. and puts it back in. You know what I'm saying? Or he lights it himself or something. I don't remember. But the point being that it's like so fucking commonplace. That, like everybody smoked.
Yeah.
And I feel like I caught the trail end of that because nowadays it doesn't seem as prevalent. But man, growing up in the car, everywhere, it was just the thing. It was just the cultural
You
norm.
wouldn't have thought, like you said, you don't even think
television,
about it
movies,
being weird or anything. Like you said, you get into drugs or whatever. That's the family business,
and that's a drug. Tobacco's.
Oh, dude, tobacco or nicotine, crazy, bro, crazy. Like, I don't know what it's like to be addicted to heroin. Like I said, I barely know what it's like to be addicted to. I wouldn't even say I was addicted to meth, obviously, from the way I was able to put it down. But boy, was I addicted to cigarettes. You know what I mean? Like that nicotine shit had me just fucked up. And I get it. I get it. Just when we talk about right now too about how do we respond to something like this? Is it a criminalization or is it like a rehabilitation type thing, or like how do you help people out of these situations where they're addicted to these things? Because I can see exactly
some
how
people don't want to be helped.
But I guess my point is, even when I knew I wanted to quit, I was like, dude, these cigarettes are killing me and they're gross, dude. But then, like you said, the shame of myself just going up to the counter, buying the cigarettes, knowing damn well I didn't want to smoke it, light it up, and I was just like, I got to. I don't want it, but I got to.
That could be the only that could be the only explanation.
Stuff.
Like that's the logical conclusion you have to come to when you've had the conversations over and over in your head where you say, I don't want to do this anymore, and then you are standing there witnessing yourself doing it. The only thing that you could say is, I guess I have to do this.
Yeah, like I'm out of control now.
Like
that's the point where you can sit here and say, like, I'm out of control. Like,
That's so funny.
When you can be watching yourself doing it and thinking, why am I doing this?
I pull it back to you. Remember you made the beaten off joke where you're like, yo, nasty. I know like I just in my head you were like, you're doing it and you don't want to do it and you feel bad immediately after doing it. I was just like, are you guys talking about jerking off? It sounds like you guys are talking about jerking off. Oh,
I always
so
want
funny.
to do that. Never know once when I find myself being like, I don't want to jerk off right now.
Why am I doing this now? You're like, this is amazing.
I'm damn sure.
Why am I not doing this all the time?
I wish I lived by myself.
I wish everybody would just leave so I could do this.
We think you have an addiction. No, I don't. No, I love it.
Oh, so funny.
I just love jerking off. It's not an addiction at all. Which you can get addicted to. Who knew? You can get addicted to anything. But that was the U.S.'s response on drugs and everything.
Try not to scream, laugh all the time.
The war on drugs.
Really
which
funny.
is like, like you said, I think we've taken the stance on like, you're a bad person for doing this. I don't even know.
I think that they wanted to like scare them straight. I think they thought like when they were thinking, it was kind of the same thing when they thought about like maybe prohibition with alcohol and stuff like that. Like they saw how it made a small subsection of people act if they let it get too far, and they deduced that, well, shit, if we just let people drink, they'll all get this way. Like that's how they get it. Like the longest drinkers end up like this, and so like you think, well, we have to save them from themselves or something like that, and like so you don't let them do it, and you put all this like, we're gonna lock you up and we're gonna like it's bad, society doesn't like it. You try to like dissuade them from doing it.
That's true.
But of course, as human beings, as soon as you say, hey, don't go look over that bush,
What's
and
on
then
the other
you
side
and
of
then you
that
can
bush?
walk away. All right, I'm gonna go look at that bush.
Yeah. Do you think it proliferates that though? Do you think the war, like the fact that it's frowned upon or shunned or whatever, like leads people to it? You think?
I mean, at least a certain amount of people. I mean, obviously not all of them, but I do think that it's one of the major factors perpetuating it because I mean, you can see this in like teenage girls and their choices of boyfriends, for instance. If like you really dislike your daughter's boyfriend, how likely is it that she breaks up with her? Especially if she already thinks that you're over controlling and stuff, which dads tend to be of other daughters.
I feel that.
So it's like immediately like they're doing it literally just to spite you, you know? And so I think that it's kind of the same way. Like you come up to a person who feels autonomous and you tell them, you're not allowed to do that. Yeah. They're like, this? Yeah. Fuck you. I'll do this all day.
What's wrong with doing this?
Yeah. What is like, what's wrong? And they were like, it's bad. It's bad. We've seen it.
You don't tell me what to do, fucker.
I do this all the
time.
This
There's
is
nothing bad about it.
And then they'd be like,
great.
you know what?
You don't even know.
Fuck you.
You don't even know how good
I'll drink this whole goddamn bottle right now.
Well, it reminds me of, you remember when it was like super, like the seltzer beers were coming out at first? You remember all those? There's
the
tons
Trulies,
of them. The Trulies and stuff like that. Yeah,
Mike
the
Sard-
seltzer.
I remember
think
Mike-
it's self-serve beer. Oh,
No,
it's
what's the
where
word I'm looking-
fucking come out with all the self-serve beer?
I ain't never seen no seltzer.
Is seltzer the correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, the seltzer beers.
Yeah.
And everybody was shitting on them.
Yeah.
Like it was like the cultural thing to do to be like that is
Some pansy
for-
shit.
Yeah, it's some pansy shit is the
Yeah.
best way to put it. And then like now it's like everybody fucking.
Oh,
drinks it.
everybody
drinks
loves
that.
it.
It's like the
self-serve
they
beer, yeah.
it stopped being like it's like
Mhm.
you know Zima. You know, it's not
Mhm.
Zima anymore. It's not
Mhm.
you know like a girlish thing. It's
Yeah.
like
No.
now every
every
beer
body.
company has adopted this
It has
idea
one.
of seltzer
Yeah.
water
Yeah.
being like a beer
Mhm.
beer water.
Yeah.
Thing.
You know,
Yeah, it's just
whatever
like a
the
little
fuck it is.
alcoholic thing. Like it's so funny. I
It's totally true.
I took this girl out to this barbecue place, and she was like, "We should get some alcohols and stuff." And I was like, "All right, that's cool, whatever." And then she was like, "You drink Trulies or something?" And I was like, "Not really, but
No.
I fucking drink it. It doesn't matter to me.
Mhm.
It's got alcohol in it." She was like, "Yeah, sure."
See, it's
I didn't
passed on.
double think about it at all. I was just like, "Sure." But I remember if you had asked me in high school if I was gonna drink a Mike's Hard Lemonade,
Mhm.
I'd have told you to go fuck yourself. I'd have been
What
like,
was the other one? Bacardi. The Bacardi was it Bacardi?
so many
What was
people
that?
have had them. It's hard to tell.
Mhm.
Like I.
No, it's something like that.
What?
The
Like
one
a
that we
drink
used to
that
make
back in
fun
the
of.
day?
Yeah.
Oh, Smirnoff.
Smirnoff, the Smirnoff ices.
Yeah, everybody comes
Yes,
to like
you
a
see
party with
somebody
a
a wine
Smirnoff,
cooler.
yeah.
That's what it
Yes,
was.
yes.
You see
A
somebody
Bartles
pull
and
a
James? Get
yeah.
outta
You're at like
here.
a
Stop.
barbecue.
Like,
You
the
see some old
fuck?
dude pull out a
Yeah.
wine cooler. You're like, Steve, what are you doing?
What's wrong
Imagine
with you?
going to Jarmar Hooks' backyard barbecue and pulling out a fucking.
It's
wine
interesting though.
cooler.
Again, once again.
Let us know in the
social
comments what
proof.
kind of foo alcoholic drinks you like to have.
They're not
Yeah, because
foo-foo anymore,
nowadays
then,
it's
so.
not foo-foo. That's what I'm saying. Like Bartles and James or Smirnoff Ice or
I see
something.
more
It's
people
still
drinking
kind of.
seltzers, but it's
But
like
the
like you said
seltzers have
again,
just,
it's the cool thing to do though. Now
transcended
it's
it.
just about fitting in with everybody. Everybody's drinking the seltzer water thing.
Yeah,
so
they
you
talk
just
shit
like,
about
you
it at
get-
first.
At least here in LA, it's funny because some of the people that watch this are gonna be from like
We don't
Kansas.
drink no
They're like,
goddamn seltzer.
we fucking hate this shit.
Yeah, but see, Bud Light's got it now.
You
That's the
don't
thing.
ever- Yeah, it's
Is like-
mainstream now. No.
like-
But they still won't drink it. I mean,
true, but
it's
I'm-
funny. It's like they love Bud Light so much, but like Bud anything else. Like I know people that swear by Bud Light, but they think Budweiser is trash. They will literally shit on regular
It's different.
Budweiser
It's
and make
different, though.
and
It's
it's like
definitely a
it's
different
definitely
vibe.
different, but I
taste.
think it's so funny because it's like it's not a brand thing.
Mm.
It's just like or maybe it is, but it's like Bud
A
Light is
style
like
thing.
now its own brand.
Yeah.
And like people are like, we don't drink regular Bud. We like that Bud Light.
Mhm. Well,
or
I mean, it's like
whatever.
cigarettes. Like you might drink, you might smoke a light, or you might smoke a
menthol
Or a
or
good old
something.
fashioned red.
Yeah.
Pack
Red.
of Eagle Reds, darling.
They all
Yeah.
kill you the same, by
Yeah.
the way. Just,
I remember when
good
I
old
remember when I
fashions.
had this fucking I had this dude when we owned that smoke shop in Hesperia. We had this dude who worked at this city council building next door, and he came over every single day and bought a pack of Camel non-filters. And I was like,
They
bro,
sell them no filters. I thought that was illegal.
No.
No, you can
Ooh.
sell.
You can sell them
Camel's
no
one of the
filter.
only ones that
That
would
does
sell
it still.
in bigger stores. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I would see them come through my grocery stores I
Yep.
worked at. It would be the smaller pack.
Smaller pack, yeah. And
I knew a guy that smoked them too.
I
They're all
seen.
tarry and nasty.
Oh
on the
yeah,
end.
it's terrible.
Ugh.
And I was like, "You smoke a whole pack of these a day?" He's like, "Oh yeah." He was like proud of it. And I was like, "All right." I mean, at that time I still smoked cigarettes, and I was like, "You're fucking crazy."
you got a
like,
problem, buddy.
Yeah, I was like, "Bro, you need to chill."
Yeah.
I smoked a pack a day back then,
Yeah.
and I was just looking at this guy like he was crazy
least I have
of-
filters.
Yeah, I was like, "But I got filters, bro. Like, come on."
It's just crazy that there's people that will smoke a pack a day for 40 years and live. They're still alive.
Yeah, big kicking.
Just
Oh yeah,
keep
those like super old like.
Yeah.
There's like this quintessential image of like this old factory Asian dude just like squatting outside in like a puddle of you don't even know what,
Engine
smoking or something, and he's just like, he's just gonna live to like 105.
It's still probabilities.
Yeah, it's probability. It's like weird.
Like you're
Probabilities, yeah.
increasing your chance of death, but it's not a death sentence.
not a death
you know?
sentence, yeah,
But
it's
it's like, do you really want to?
You're not really getting much from it. So.
To bring your risk up 60%, like, is it worth all that?
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know.
Like, what if somebody said tomorrow, if you go outside, you might get $100, but your chances of getting hit by a bus will increase to 85%.
Yeah, it's like no.
It's
I'm
like,
not going outside.
I'm just
I'm
gonna say
not
it's
going
fine.
I don't want to.
and then
I don't want to play those.
Keanu
odds.
Reeves slams through your house with the bus from Speed.
it comes for you anyways.
And then the boat from Speed 2.
I never saw Speed 2. I
It
didn't
was
know
about a
that
boat.
they-
I do like it. It's about a
about a
boat.
boat.
Like when Ben Shapiro be doing his ads and stuff, and it's like, man, he be doing like 5 ads a fucking show
That's
sometimes. I'm
what
like,
I'm
get
at
your
with.
guap, dog, but god damn these
Bro,
ads.
My problem is if you just wanted to pitch and be like, hey, by the way, this is brought to you by Gillette. I'd be like, oh,
I'm talking,
word.
yeah,
But it's
7.3 second ads.
three
I'm
and
talking
half
a whole
minute,
read where they
like,
have to tell a
breakdown,
personal
and he's,
story.
like, with the thing, and he's like, it
Nope.
says here that they're fucking.
I want to give them four. I want to give them 4 7-second
Yeah.
chunks of quality content, and then the rest of the time maybe they're in view or something or some other thing.
Yeah.
you know,
Welcome
like
to
a
Super
banner.
Bowl 44, brought to you by AT&T. Like that's what it should be.
And then it's and then, you know,
That's what-
this
like,
is
you gotta
the
think, like,
halftime show brought to you by T-Mobile.
I'll wear your
Do you
logo
need
on
a
my
new
jersey. You know, I'll
Yeah,
wear my
exactly.
shirt right
Do
here.
you need a new phone? Use AT&T.
When we
That's
get
all you
sponsored, that's how we'll do it. We'll
Do
just
brand
like
logo
shirt
brand
sponsors, yeah. It's gonna be great.
like a microphone and shit.
We get paid by the minute.
AT&T right here on this.
But
I'm so fucking into that idea. Yeah, I'm like
like
ready
race
to
car
scream.
driver shirt.
Yes, I'm talking
Exactly,
about,
like jerseys.
Yes,
with like tie-dye, like a tie-dye
AIG,
patch.
right?
Yep, exactly.
3-hour-long podcast. Their
Like
logo
race car
just
drivers
staring
wearing
at
I
the
will
fucking
make one
suits.
caveat though. The one podcast that I love to listen to the ads is Bill Burr's Monday Morning Podcast. When he reads those goddamn ads, it's so funny.
Some people are crafty. with
He's
them,
just
yeah.
hilarious. It's actually just because he sucks at reading.
That's
He's
how
the
kind of Joe's
worst.
were. Joe would just read these little thing blurbs
Yeah.
in the beginning. He'd fuck them up sometimes. He'd be like, "Blah, I'm stupid."
It's funny too.
Anyways,
He'll be
mushrooms.
shitting on the ad copy, which like you'll know that Jason got in trouble one time. I remember for like saying something about how
Calling
bad
it
the
out.
copy was, and they were like, "Oh, you can't say something about our copy.
Yeah.
That was bad." And he was like, "Well, I was just telling you how you can make it better, but I got you." Bill Burr will they'll be like talk about a time when you did this, and he'll read that because he's just reading, and so he'll be like blah 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 blah, talk about a time when you had an experience where you had a bad bed, and he was like, fucking stop telling me to do that, just write what you want me to say. I'm not gonna fucking come up with any stories or anything, like just put fucking, and
Just give me money.
buying ads,
Yeah.
and they don't change them
That's crazy.
It's
because
his
they're
style.
funny,
That's his personality. He's a
Yeah, that's
comedian,
his
so you get to just
move.
roast the ad.
and
Yeah.
people must be buying it.
Yeah. I always wonder what that like return you're looking for on an ad is. I mean, you know what I mean? 5 people sign up for your thing or some shit.
It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard.
Hey, with streamers and stuff, there's a lot of stuff where it's like, hey, use my code. Like they'll give you a code. Like somebody will sponsor
Well, that's
you.
how
like
they
a
track.
website.
That's how they
Yeah.
track their return on investment there.
Or
is
go to
like-
this my special URL or whatever.
Use
It's-
my coupon
yeah.
code, baby.
And you always think that that's like, oh, that's how they give you, but it's just so that they can
Track who gets what, who's bringing in
the traffic.
traffic.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like hey, Joe.
You're not bringing
You know,
in a
Tim
traffic.
Ferriss is like doubling
pitching
your
it up.
numbers.
Yeah,
you should
yeah.
probably
We're
step
gonna
it
go
up.
ahead and take your
Yeah.
budget.
We're gonna
and
need
move
to
it
make.
over
You're
there.
gonna need to make a takedown video this
Yeah.
month. We need a little drama in your YouTube.
Yeah, like you need to step it up. The war on drugs really started Reagan era,
Yeah.
right? Like
Late
like
80s, mid- late
85,
80s.
88. You know, is right when I was born. Start popping off out in these streets. But you know, for me, I think it's weird. It's like it's a terrible response. I feel like, but I think I get it from their perspective
Mhm.
in a sense of they weren't like trying to criminalize you, the user, right? Or like they weren't really coming after you.
They didn't
thought
understand.
we'll sweep these things off the
Yes.
streets, and then that'll solve the lower level.
That's what they thought. They
problem.
didn't understand that it's addictive behavior. That it's not
Right,
necessarily
right.
just wipe up these drug dealers. They thought
Right.
if we can get these damn drug dealers
It's these
off the
drug
street,
dealers that are just hooking our kids on drugs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
no,
not
it's your
like
kids.
that.
They love
It's your
fucking
kid-
drugs.
It's your
They're
kids'
literally
friends that are
yeah,
getting.
They're like running to find these people. Please, for the love of God, some of these drugs.
Yeah, which is interesting enough because you're not showing them the love and attention that they need. So they're running here to these drugs.
Filling that hole
and
with
then,
drugs.
And then we blame the people providing the drugs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
providing the thing that they're trying to ease their pain with.
Yeah, fascinating. But nonetheless, that's why I think that they were coming out with that war on drugs, you know. And so, for anybody who doesn't know, this was actually a policy set forth by Ronald Reagan, or Reagan or Nixon. It says the term was popularized by the media shortly after a press conference given on June 18th, 1971, by Richard Nixon, the day after publication of a special message from President Nixon to the Congress on drug abuse and
Public enemy
number one. That's what it was. Yeah, it's a public enemy. And we got to pay attention as the term war on drugs, something like that.
Well, I think the reason why a lot of people
it was
attribute
Reagan.
Reagan is
Yeah.
because of Nancy Reagan.
Oh, okay.
And because Ronald Reagan, he put in policies and stuff like that, but Nancy Reagan was the one that was out there promoting the war on drugs. She was huge in the DARE policy and, like, you know,
Yeah.
keep kids off drugs and stuff like that.
Oh,
So,
she
like,
made there.
I don't know if she made Dare, but she was just out there promoting,
just like Michelle
that was
Obama.
her big thing
Yeah.
was the drugs,
Yeah.
and like clearly it looked like she's like, as I look at it now, she probably had some sort of like personal
Sure.
influence with that. Like it was like a personal issue for her. So like she took a huge
People
stance
tend
on the
to
war
think-
on drugs,
yeah.
and she was like, we need to fucking like, this is the compassionate thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like a huge proponent of it. And I
Well,
was
like I said, I think Michelle Obama with child obesity, right? Like
Yeah.
that was her thing. Like you pick a thing as a first lady, I guess, to say I'm gonna make influence
Melania's was bullying.
bullying.
Yeah.
See, so yeah, we all got one. But hers was the drugs. She picked drugs, and she did a damn good
Ronald
job.
Reagan established procedures for civil asset forfeiture.
oh yeah,
Thanks, Ronald.
thanks, Mr. Freedom.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ronald Reagan.
Asset forfeiture. I'm gonna forfeit
Yes.
my assets to you.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr.
And they'll be
President.
like, well, they're drug dealers. And it's like, well, no, they're actually just presumed drug dealers. So it circumvents that whole innocent till proven guilty thing where they take all your stuff and then put you in jail until your trial, which they linger on.
Oh yeah.
And then by the time you get out of trial and try to get your stuff, you need a lawyer.
Yep.
So you got to pay for your trial. You got to pay for your lawyers.
They definitely use drugs to create one of the greatest like government overreaches like we've seen since probably 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
Like or it's, seen before 9/11. 9/11 obviously they used
the
that to see
Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984.
that's the one. Look at this.
CCC
From
Act.
1980 to 1984, the federal annual budget of the FBI's drug enforcement units went from 8 million to 95 million.
In 4 years.
Now that's inflation on another level.
Bro, that is in fucking insane.
What is that's like a
That's
Almost
a
10
boom.
times
over a
increase.
1,000? It's like 1,000%
Yeah.
increase.
Yeah, I don't know. I was gonna say 10 times, but like 10 times would be 80
That'd be
mil.
1,000.
So over. Yeah, okay, over. Either way, it's a ridiculous amount. And I always think of often as this idea that force rises to meet force.
Mhm.
And we talk about this when we talked about any of this stuff, military spending, or you creating a strong like security posture. Anything like that, just force rises to meet force, and that's what I think happened here. I don't know if the drugs did it first, or if this is the reaction.
Yeah,
or
you don't know if they put
stimulus,
crack into the fucking ghettos and then
pump
pumped money into these
to their
systems.
side, or if it happened like drugs were really just running
So they
rampant
just
and getting
really
out of
needed
control,
that,
so
yeah.
they needed to respond in a way. But either way, it only escalated both for sure.
What leads me to believe that it's the latter of the two situations is my inherent belief that it's very rare to find evil people out here.
Mhm.
And maybe less so to this extent that like you find evil people, but they're not all evil, like they're not to their core evil. Like they in some ways thought that what they were doing was going to help somebody, maybe if it was just them or whatever. But I try to attribute as much as I can to ignorance and stupidity rather than maliciousness, as Ben Shapiro says. But also I think it has to do with the fact that if you see like there's such a huge psychological and cultural and social shift in the 60s, and then the generation that was born then is now in their young adults in the 80s, which is who the drugs hit the most, young adults and teenagers and stuff like that. And then you see there was some sort of, and you also see like the rates of fatherless homes rising in the time and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that play on the social aspect that
You
we
think people
talked
were
about.
salty?
Economic salty.
Yeah, like you're saying, like these people who were making policies in the 1980s were salty about what happened to them as young adults in the 60s.
No, I'm saying that the young people having to deal with these new cultural issues and voids in their psychological upbringing are filling them with drugs, which is why we see such a sharp increase in it.
Okay.
And then the politicians just make the logical reaction
Okay.
to that, which is we got to stamp these crazy kids out.
Okay, I feel what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you talking about?
I thought you were saying those people who started as young adults in the 60s turned into the
policy
war on
the
drugs.
policy people.
So
Yeah,
I was
like,
they're
what?
That's
kinda
what I thought too. So I'm like, yeah.
I was like, the
yes,
rise on
go on.
drugs? Like they lost all their dads and
Yes.
their morals. They're like,
Nancy
fuck it, we got-
Pelosi was fatherless. No,
I doubt it.
That's what I thought we were going with it. But no, I see. You think it started with the because I mean counterculture and drugs really did explode into the scene in the 60s.
Mhm.
So I definitely think that it had the time. Maybe not have been as bad as people thought it was, but we definitely thought it was bad, And anyways, so response, 1980, the situation began to change in the 1980s. While the number of arrests for all crimes had risen by 28%, the number of arrests for drug offenses rose 126%. Just skyrocketed. And what's so funny? We still see this today. Like, you definitely feel like that's the main job of the police now. It's
to arrest drug people.
to like just keep drugs off the streets, and like it's like
that's just what I assume that they're doing all the time is that they're
versus
looking for drugs.
Yeah, it's like that's their whole shtick
Like
now.
They catch people in
get that
speed
next
traffic
line,
and
too.
stuff too. But
Let me get that. So the result of increased demand was the development of privatization and the for-profit prison industry. The U.S. Department of Justice, reporting on the effects of state initiatives, have stated that from 1990 through 2000, the increasing number of drug offenses accounted for 27% of the total growth among black inmates, 7% among Hispanic, and 15% among white. That's wild, man.
In addition to prison or jail, the United States provides for the deportation of many non-citizens convicted. So, I mean, they just clamp down on everybody and use like drugs as like their main go-to, And so I definitely see a lot of people point to this as like this is where people feel like America went on its second offensive against black people.
Yeah, this is where people point to systemic racism as
Right.
well. Now
Yeah.
we've got privatized prisons, a for-profit prison industry that's making money off the fact that they're putting black people in jail. And they might be sucking up tax funds from states, but they don't care because they're a private company. It's profit to them.
Yeah.
So you might say that, well, it's a drain on the state, and it is. But these private corporations
yeah.
are not
Yeah, they don't give a shit.
getting anything drained from them.
No,
They're making money.
it's a license to print money.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Because I mean, what more of a stable source of money do you think you could come up with other than taxes?
Yeah.
Always, everybody pays their taxes.
So
Like,
here's the scheme.
Get that money.
So
in.
here's
and
the
so
scheme.
if you could figure out a way to plug into that,
that
just siphon
constant
some of that
source.
tax money off, you'll always have it.
Yeah.
Here's
It's
the
not going
scheme. All
away.
these people that are politicians that are in power, if you want to look at it nefariously, they scheme it up, right? They say, okay, we're going to criminalize all this shit so we can throw all these people in jail so we can suck up all this tax money that we can make these laws in place, and then we pay these private corporations, and then we're the CEOs of those corporations when we
get
out of
kickbacks and all
politics, we
kinds
get
of stuff.
kickbacks.
Yep.
Their lobbies pay us.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a win-win-win-win-win-win,
is-
except for the people who are getting put in fucking prison and dying because of all the fucking drugs, which are the people in the lower class.
Yeah.
Sometimes it affects high-class people, but the politicians,
But see,
I guess
they
Hunter
get off,
Biden was
though.
smoking crack, so
Yeah, they
you
get
know,
off.
that
They-
blows
they
a hole
all
in
do
my
drugs.
ears.
They'll
Blows
walk
a hole
right
right
away.
out of that
They'll
one.
walk right away from that shit, though.
Yeah.
So it's you can get.
I did not inhale.
Yeah.
It's like,
you know what I mean? Like,
What was
they'll
in that
walk-
cigar, Bill?
Nigga, please.
Before
Come
that.
on, bro.
But yeah, it's crazy. I would agree. I think it's like I always thought is like people use problems, little chess pieces on the board, right?
Yep.
And this is why I'm anti-fear. You're afraid of things, and then they take that fear and they turn it right back on you. So it's like, oh, you're afraid of drugs?
Let me lock up all these
we got
people.
a solution for that.
Yeah.
Don't you worry about that.
Clamp down
anything.
on your
We'll
rights.
figure that out.
You know what I mean? You got a little pain? Need a little relief from your pain?
Take
I got
these
some.
pills.
I
Take
got
these
some for you.
pills. Don't worry.
Got something for you.
Are you gonna become addicted? Oh, it's gonna get you. Like it's going.
Yeah, sounds good,
It's gonna
don't it?
cost you a lot more in the long run, but in the short term, it's gonna get rid of your pain. You know, your pain that you think you have from drugs or terrorism or
Poor
right now
incentives.
coronavirus. You know, whatever. I think that that's the problem is that when you have a fear as a society, it's easily manipulated. It's easy corkscrew. It's like on a human psychological basis, you know, it's just easy. You're in a state where they can just turn that little wrench on you, and it happens this way. I mean, this hasn't worked. I mean, newsflash. Fast forward.
Yeah, let me just
fast
skip to
forward
the end
40,
for you.
40 years.
It didn't work.
It didn't do shit.
Let's look at the cost of the taxpayer.
I love this headline: creation of a permanent underclass. Yeah,
People who are
Strip them of their voting rights.
consistently put into the system and then kept there.
Yeah, 100%.
There is no way back.
Because now you like you said, you're such a dredge of society. You can't even vote anymore because you use drugs. We caught you with the drug, which we gave you. You know, we gave you.
And then we
drugs
give you
caught
few educational or job opportunities, often as a result of being punished for the drug offenses.
all another punch on your insula, right? It's like
Yeah,
you're
hit 'em again.
permanently down
Get
there at the
addicted.
bottom, and it's just like
Keep doing it.
Stay on drugs down there, and just we'll keep scooping you off the ground.
And the worst part, I think that we should send people to different. this is a quick thing. I think we should send people to different prisons in different states and stuff like that. Because like if you're gonna keep it all the same or whatever, like you get out of prison in your neighborhood or whatever, who you hang out with?
You go right back into that
Your drug
little
people.
system.
You're fucking you're gangbanging homies, like
Yeah.
the people you know.
Like you said.
But if you get out of prison in
changing.
Wisconsin and you're from California, what do you do? Got to figure out how to survive in Wisconsin.
You
There would
knock
be-
off
there should be
some
a really-
old lady in Wisconsin.
Should be-
Possibly.
It should be.
I don't know. It's a hard goddamn problem.
Rehabilitation and placement for drug offenders, I think, is the answer.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think that's the answer.
But, like,
We're
You
gonna
just
talk
don't put them
about
in
that.
jail in the first place.
But you know,
Or
like
you just
said,
rehabilitate
like,
them.
jail. Literally, it's so.
It's not really
Damn, I'm
conducive.
hitting the epiphany's hitting me right now. It's you literally just scoop them off the street, hold them. It's slavery again. You know what I mean? You just enslave them.
I invented slavery.
You make money and then you release them, and it's like fishing. And then you just go out there and you fish some more, and you just swallow up, like throw a net out there, catch them, sell them, and then release them again. And it's crazy.
You're saying
It's
exactly what Kanye says.
like, yeah, I mean,
You're
it's
talking
like
Kanye right now.
100%. That's
true.
exactly the way it seems to work.
You just pull that fish out of the water. You take that nice Instagram picture.
Hey, it should be a great time to
Literally
pull
just
up the
let 'em
13th
go.
Amendment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. The
Just really quick. You know,
the movie.
it's nice. No, the actual 13th Amendment to
Oh,
the.
yeah. Okay.
It's where it says it's slavery's still legal.
Yeah.
Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a
Except-
punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Section 1.
Yeah. So essentially, that fact that slavery is a prison, right? Like, or prison is.
Yeah, it's
slavery.
literally saying
like that is slavery.
you're allowed to enslave them as a punishment for
just
crime.
as long as you use a judicial process to get
That's
there.
that's the hook.
Yeah.
That's you fish, like you said, you're fishing.
Mhm.
You catch them doing a crime, bring them to court, judiciarily enslave them.
Yeah.
And then
But this is why I've always said that it's not about, like, I'm afraid of the government, right? And I'm afraid of police. And it has nothing to do with breaking the rules. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's the power that you hold that fears me the most. You, John Allen, or any Joe Schmo Walker, it's going to be hard for you to enslave me. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for you and maybe your 5 cronies, even that, to kidnap me, keep me against my will, all that
a complicated
stuff.
process.
It's a really tough thing to pull off, okay?
they're doing it for your life. They're enslaving you for life by putting you in a permanent underclass.
They'll just snatch you, and without any, they'll snatch you.
Come in broad daylight. Just knock on your front door.
And just
hello, excuse
come
me,
with
sir.
us.
You're coming with us
Yeah,
now.
and
Turn
there's
around.
No choice for you.
And he's
There's
like, for what?
No choice.
They'll
for
come
you.
unmarked, unannounced.
No
Yeah.
choice
Like
for you.
Breonna Taylor, they might get the
And when
might
they
just
want
bust that door down.
you, there's no getting away
There's
from
nothing-
that.
and it's so
there's
funny when people
there's
say-
nobody to help you.
When
There's
people say like, "Oh, well, as long as you're not breaking the law, then you don't have to be afraid
It's
of that
crazy.
power," and I'm like, well, as long as the laws stay coherent and make sense, because as soon as the laws stop making sense, I'm going to stop following them, and then what?
You don't have a chip in your arm. That's breaking the law.
That's breaking the law. Well, I don't want a chip in my
Well,
arm.
that's right to
Doesn't
slavery
matter.
then.
And
you're
it's like,
breaking the law. You did not sign up for
And
it.
it's
We
so
gave
funny.
you plenty of time to get the chip in your arm, Mac.
yeah, it's so funny. People like bring up laws like they're the barriers in which morality rests, and it's like, well, if you're not breaking the law, then you're a good person. And it's like, you do remember, like, not that many years, not even 100 years ago, it was totally legal for you to just beat the shit out of your wife. Nobody could say a thing about it. That was legal.
But
the
no,
law.
but that's my point too, though. It's like the philosophy or the mindset that if we create a law against drugs, make drugs illegal, that somehow sways the human consciousness from doing that.
Yep.
You know, like that's crazy. Like, I mean, I get that it's like the fear that power will be invoked on you. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's like a threat of. But the real consequence is like the law doesn't create that. Those people still got to catch you, and those people could catch you doing anything at any time. So you always got to be like,
As far as I'm concerned,
regardless of the law, you need
Yeah.
to watch out for these motherfuckers that have got the keys to the slaves.
as far as I'm concerned, the police are just like anybody else to me with a gun.
Yeah,
If you got a gun,
I'm nervous.
yeah, I'm
skeptical.
gonna do what you say. I'm gonna avoid you. I don't want to be anywhere near you if you're just hanging onto
Yeah.
a gun.
Yeah.
But you make a great point, though, that me just having a gun doesn't mean I can enslave you.
Yeah.
But that cop having that gun also has the power to enslave you.
Yeah.
Like if
Oh,
he
yeah.
walks up and starts talking to you, and something happens, like
Like you spit on them.
anything. Well, just
Well,
you know,
and
it
you
could
snatch
be-
a woman off a wall.
I think about
It could
back
be
when we talked
anything,
about
man.
George Floyd, right? that would not happen in the streets if those people weren't wearing uniforms.
True.
Somebody who's watching them
Would
would have
beat the
Billy
sh-
Club
yeah.
the fuck
What
out
the
of
fuck
him.
you doing to this guy?
Like, get off that man.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing to this dude? But because they were cops, everybody had to sit there and be like, hey man,
Stop doing that, please.
with their fucking phone. This is
We're
fucked up.
filming you.
This is really fucked up.
Please don't kill this guy.
But you can't stop that. You can't intervene because then guess where you're going?
Right there
right
with 'em.
there,
They're gonna enslave you
Get this
too.
bitch on his
Yep.
face.
Too. You're gonna go right
Yep.
on the fucking
You
ground.
see those
face first,
handcuffs?
too.
Those might as well be
Dude,
slave
they're-
shackles,
oh,
buddy. As soon as
buddy,
they
and
put
you're
them on
going
you,
right in.
you're in the welcome
Yep.
to the underclass. And you know what? I'm lucky enough. I'm lucky enough to have, like I have one or two things on my record, but I'm not stuck in that permanent underclass. But
I've
people
noticed-
very close to me and my family
But-
are stuck in that
Dude,
permanent underclass, and I've
100%.
seen it affect them.
Yeah.
And it's like, for what?
For what?
For what? For selling a little weed,
Yeah.
huh? Well, I caught you smoking that weed, Mac. Guess
Yeah.
what? No more good jobs for you,
no
buddy.
voting for you.
No voting for you, buddy.
That's crazy.
You got to fucking pay or fight to get that right back,
Yeah.
which means you got to pay back into the system of the fucking master that enslaved you
Yeah.
in the fucking first place so they can use that money to fucking catch more slaves.
It's
This
crazy.
shit's fucking insane,
Yeah.
man.
And yeah, it's just nuts. It's just nuts for a problem that again is just people having a hard time coping with their social anxieties. You know what I mean? Or like what? I'm not saying that's the reason for all addiction, but a lot of addiction plays out from the fact that it's not just about social inclusion. It's about that loving, nurturing relationships or feeling like you matter in the world and that people care about you
Inclusion.
and that and that others are looking out for you. You said it earlier, and these are things that you find in some places and some places you don't. And when those people don't have that, you tend to look for something to numb that pain, right?
Yep.
And so it's like all these people suffering from a pain that we're causing to each other. But then if you suffer from that pain, or if you fuck up in trying to solve that problem for yourself, then we'll punish you and criminalize
Right.
you and throw you in an underclass.
It's crazy.
It's
it's
wild.
so interesting. It's like that. It strikes me that old saying that a lot of people's moms tell them, if you're someone who smoked weed when you were young, you might have heard this, but I remember my mom, when she was like on the whole, like, it's a gateway drug type of thing,
Yeah.
was like, well, nobody just wakes up and says, I'm going to get addicted to drugs today.
Mm.
That's true.
Yeah.
Nobody does that.
Mm-mm.
But it has nothing to do with being a gateway drug. But like that statement just kind of rang in my head right now. I was like, I mean, it's true. Like nobody wakes up thinking, you know what? I think I'm gonna go get hooked on heroin
Today's
today.
the day I'm gonna get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
No, they
like
just have pain
they
in
just
their
have
back.
pain,
And the doctor says,
it's-
take this medicine
Yeah.
right here.
yeah,
once
I'm
a
gonna
day,
prescribe
every
you
day.
these pain pills to fix the pain in your
Right.
back, and you're like, dope, thanks, doc.
100%.
I fucking
This
love
really
you.
Thank
smart
you.
guy
Yeah.
that fucking gets.
He's got
I,
a thing on the
you know,
wall.
he's been your doctor since you had your first child.
Why
He's-
would I ever
Yeah,
question?
like what?
Yep.
Why would he do me wrong?
I
Or
had
like the same thing he goes, your friends. These are my friends. These people are looking out for me.
Yeah.
They care about me. They want me to have a
good time.
Like, yeah, they want me to have a good time. They're gonna have fun. They want me to have fun. Why would I say no? Yeah, it's crazy.
Boom. I mean, that's why it's so funny when people will be like, well, it's just illogical to do drugs. And I'm like, it's super logical
That
to
makes
do
the most
drugs. Like,
sense.
you just don't understand logic if you think it's
Mhm.
illogical to do drugs.
It's-
Like,
this is one of the spheres where we've really tried to take the route of propagandizing people away from it, though. That's why you hear things like gateway drug, or really if you like people just try and fear you away from it. This is the same thing that this
The drug
tactic
war.
is like
Yeah.
scare you away from it.
You're gonna go to
And-
jail forever.
Yeah. We're gonna put you in a permanent underclass. Which
you
is
do this
true.
3 times or you're fucking done.
But-
You're
Doesn't
gone.
matter how
Oh,
much.
yeah, you're gone.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you just have a little tiny pinch of weed. If I find it 3 times, you're
But
done.
it's like, but we're not gonna tell you what to do. We're just gonna tell you what you should not do.
Yep.
It's like you should not do drugs. You got all this pain, and I know you're
Yep.
looking for a solution for it, but whatever you do, don't do drugs. Like,
Yep.
oh well, then I'll kill myself. Thanks. You know, it's
Yep.
like
Classic
Well,
misdiagnosis of the problem.
yeah.
Happens from government all the time. It seems to be the only thing that they can do right is misdiagnose problems.
So, but I mean, what do you guys think about that though? In the sense of like, you know, I've argued about this plenty of times as a libertarian and stuff. Like people always ask about that. Like, well, what do you do like about drugs? You know, like you're just gonna let drugs run rampant out here. You know, the availability increases, more people are likely to get on them and stuff like that. Like these are arguments for the idea of clamping down on these types of substances. I mean, what do y'all think about that though?
I think we need some way to lower our cultural addiction to taking prescription medicine. Number one, I don't know how to do that.
Which is
I don't have a I don't have a solution for that one. And then the other two would be to look at Portugal and to look at Oregon and say like, do these techniques work? Because if we can find techniques that do work and we find some beneficial way to rehabilitate people, or decriminalization that could lead to less usage or less overdose death, if we can just move the scales in positive ways.
Yeah, because we haven't seen that yet. I don't think. I don't think we've seen anything. I mean, I don't know.
Well, it's funny.
Actually, the United States is supposed to be the leader and stuff, and we're obviously getting it fucking wrong.
I think that it's interesting because the evidence I think is in at this point. Like Oregon and Portugal really aren't doing anything new. Like we know from looking at the results of different programs, like even like AA, something that's free, it's anonymous and stuff like that. Like these programs work. Like
they do not. AA has a terrible
reusage rate.
Completion rate and efficacy rate.
Let's say it's good.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I mean, it's not perfect, but
I mean it's good. Yeah, what 20 almost 25, on average.
Yeah, retainment. That's pretty good retainment.
15 to
because the thing is like if you can get, because I think what like we talked about, I said the misdiagnosis of the problem. The real problem, like we said, is a social issue. It seems like that's where, I mean, obviously, like we said, there's some like genetic stuff, people with pain. Like we have to find better ways of treating pain. I think you're right. Like it's tough. I mean, holistic stuff. I mean, I'm not a holistic doctor. I'm not a regular doctor, so I don't know anything about that either. But I think that we know the solutions. Like, I mean, we've seen what prohibition does from the 1920s. I mean, it just set up the foundation for organized crime in this country.
That was a
failed experiment. And then we did it again in the 80s with the drug war, and it's a massive failure. It continues to fail to this day. But we see even if they're not the most effective, rehabilitation does work for some people. So it's worth doing. And if we know that that criminalization doesn't work for anybody, apparently, then I'd say the only people that come out of prison that end up doing well after they got arrested for a drug charge are the people that ended up finding some rehabilitation there. Maybe you find some old guy in the library and he teaches you up or something.
Yeah,
and you just, instead of going to the yard and playing ball every day, you end up in the library reading books or whatever. Like there are people that do get rehabilitated in prison, but it's of their own free will. The system is not in there trying to help them like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like substance abuse, you can rehabilitate rather than like a mental health.
Exactly.
problem.
But you're definitely coming on the other side of that experience worse off than you were. Now you're not only are you a drug addict, but you also have
this felon and like all this stigma and stuff
once
like
again,
that.
it gets messy because now you're into the pharmaceuticals where it's like mind-altering drugs and benzodiazepines or all these weird inhibitors and things like that. Where it's like, okay, they're almost making like privatized prisons making money off of this. Now it's almost like pharmaceutical companies are like, oh, you got some pain? Get addicted to this. Oh, you got some mental problems that you don't think you can
That's
control?
the problem with those drugs for sure, is that their legality is like, not even that they're legal.
They're prescribed to you.
But they're prescribed. It's like
you're told take this.
You're told that this is a solution, whereas the rest of the propaganda out there is like, this shit'll kill you. Heroin. Yeah. That shit'll kill you. Fuck off with that shit. But if it comes in a pill form and the pharmaceutical gives it to you, then it's great. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. So that was kind of like when you were talking about the point I made about dependency or like fighting pain. And that's kind of the point I wanted to make is like, I don't want the people who help us fight pain. Like I want to get the people fighting our pain. Like I want that out of the hands of the people who are prescribing us all these drugs that are drugs.
I see what you mean. Basically what you're saying is you're just pointing out the fact that the way like healthcare has a lot of bad incentives in it. It is a field that even in a really nice free market where profits incentivize better service, the incentives are not really, it's set up in a way that it would be most profitable for the healthcare provider to solve your symptoms, but not your underlying causes. Yeah. So that's where I think the problem comes into is like, I don't want to socialize it because then you get bad service on just with everything.
Yeah, I don't really have.
But then the problem is like the same thing with the prisons. It's like I don't really want people making money from people in prison, but at the same time, I don't want the government doing it with people in prison because then they're just sucking my tax dollars. I mean, they're gonna suck my tax dollars either way. But at least there's the idea of within a for-profit system that somebody could be incentivized to be doing it better than others.
Yeah. Not
but
in that industry,
when it's exactly that's what I'm saying.
Like
in those in like prison. Example. And like healthcare and stuff, like the incentives are so wildly skewed that like you really need people that are like deeply compassionate in those positions. Not that they can't make money from it, but that it being a business can't be their only reason for doing it. Like, just because it makes good money can't be the only reason. Because then when you look at it, you'll be like, well, fuck, I'll just prescribe this bitch some benzos and not fix her spine, and then I'll fucking get paid
or I'll just
forever.
keep arresting these people.
Or I'll just keep arresting these people forever, and then maybe you could be in cahoots at
So
that
I'm
point.
curious
So it's
about the
like,
Portugal thing then, because are those rehabilitation centers run by the government, or is that like a privatized thing?
Well,
or?
I think we need to go back first because y'all don't even like. Y'all gotta catch me up on the Portugal Oregon thing because I'm not educated on it. Like I don't even know
Portugal
what they're doing.
Decriminalized drugs entirely and made it so that you basically have to go to like rehabilitation centers. Oregon decriminalized it in a sense that if you get caught with a small amount, then there's no longer like going to jail. It's a small fine.
It's like an administrative fine, like if you get a speeding ticket.
It's up to a fine. It's not even necessarily that you get one. You could get a fine all the way up to you got to check in. Like you got to check.
You got to check into our
system.
system.
But this is definitely a regression from the 80s in the sense of like I think
in
we
the 80s
tried
you would
that.
go to jail
We
immediately.
were like, yo, let's just crank down on this, and then that'll solve the problem.
Right.
And then we quickly realized, oh, this is just creating a prison problem. It's not necessarily solving
it's not a
our
solution.
drug problem.
Yeah.
And so now people are trying to like eat because we've seen this too, even in places that aren't like fully decriminalized, like. I got pulled over in Oklahoma with a little bit of weed, and the guy let us go. Like, you know, what I mean? Like, it wasn't even a little bit. Like, we had like an ounce of weed on us.
True.
The dude,
And
like,
a lot of paraphernalia.
and like a whole jug of just like all smoking type materials. And the dude was just like, get out of here.
Yeah, and he's like, look, I can't give this. And it even seemed like he said it like it seemed like he didn't even really want to take it from us. He was like, look, I can't let you take this with you.
In this situation, it's like you would have thought it was going to be all bad. Like
over.
where we were at.
Yeah, you would have thought it was going to be
like
over.
the fact that he pulled us over on some just random sketchy. Like it seemed
He
like
said that, like,
this
our
is a white
fucking-
cop who's about to like really try and get us in, and they just let us go. So but like you said, I feel like in 1989, 91, that's
they had less
gone.
information about the problem. It seemed like you could look at the people who were using drugs and you could say, well, these people are criminals. They're all committing crimes.
that propaganda, though, like I said before.
Right.
That's
So
what it was.
like, but as we've now it's branched out into pharmaceutical drugs, and it's like branched out into all levels of society. So it's no longer, I don't think it was then, but it's definitely not now a criminal issue. It's a social issue.
Yeah,
it's
I
a
think
social
that's what
mental
we're
issue.
learning.
If you
now.
rewind your interaction you had 40 years, do you think the color of your skin on top of the fact of all these other things means that you would have gone directly to jail? Like, don't pass go.
Don't collect $200.
Yes, I do.
In the 80s.
I think the further back you go, the more my skin color becomes an issue.
I think if you go back 60 years to
Yeah.
the 60s, like if you go to 1960, 1980.
Well, that'd be 80 years, but yeah.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? When you
don't
start
drive,
going back,
you know,
like
Yeah.
there, it becomes more and more about the color of your skin and less
Oh, yeah.
and less, and
Young
even
white
so
kids
much-
with drugs, some marijuana. Hey, you guys, this isn't good. You know, they still want them to do it.
But
the
it was
young
like
black
all of a sudden
kids,
now it's like your parents
arrest them.
to deal with that. Like
Right, yeah,
like,
you
I
call your
always
parents and be
imagine
like,
young
hey,
white
little
like
Jimmy, little Jimmy, I caught him with some smoke and some
yeah,
grass, you know.
right.
Seems like we've progressed as a
And
nation
then
in
all of a
that
sudden, like,
aspect.
but the black kids, you're going to jail.
Yeah, for sure.
You're a criminal.
Yeah, slave him.
Yeah.
I think you guys proved that we hopefully have come somewhere along that like upward curve.
Oh,
of
yeah.
getting
Oh,
better.
I
as
It's
always
about a
say-
trajectory.
I say that.
It's
all
coming
the
better.
time. Like,
And
we're
that's
going-
why I think what's happening today with the whole, like, identity politics and, like,
pushing us backwards.
What's the intersectionality and all that stuff,
Intersectionality,
and like race, just the fact that race is becoming such a big issue again, and I'm like, I was kind of hoping we were done with that,
Yeah.
you know, like, but you're right, like I feel like this is a regression. This is a good regression. This is like regressing from the super totalitarianistic, like, ideas of how to control a society, and now we're like, maybe instead of trying to control them, we should just try to help them with whatever it is they think is wrong.
Yeah.
And because I think that that's what we're noticing is like they're not doing something wrong. There is something wrong. And that's the mental shift is like when you look at a drug addict, you're not like, oh, look at this dude doing something wrong.
I feel you.
You look at it and be like, man, there's something wrong with this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, something's going on there. Like
Yeah.
when you look
Right.
at homeless people now, it's like what a, it's you think less of it as a choice. You think of it more as a environmental and
I wish that we had a
personal-
better solution for
Yeah.
these people.
Yeah.
Like I wish that there was something more that we could do for them than every once in a while having to like scurry them to a new sidewalk.
Yeah. But I would,
Well, and that's what happened in Portugal. Like in 2000, it didn't really go into effect until 2001. But they basically, to combat HIV, they noticed that the rates of HIV were extremely high in drug users, particularly heroin injectors, which was huge in the 80s. And so to combat HIV, they attacked the drug problem. And so it worked fantastically. HIV fell through the floor. Now, the way that they had set it up was that you could go to these clinics where you could get medical grade heroin and they would administer it to you. And then you would have to remain in that clinic until like a period where they stated that the drug was out of your system. So while you were high and using, you could not go out into public. You had to do it there.
Yeah.
But while you were there using, they were also there like trying to help you, like giving you resources, talking to you about your life and stuff like that.
Yeah,
you were basically going through therapy while you were using drugs.
Yeah.
From what I could tell from what I read. I didn't read a whole lot about it, but that's basically what it seemed like. And so that was kind of how they did it. Instead of putting you in jail, they put you in somewhere where they were like, look, we're going to give you something that's clean. You're going to have clean needles and stuff like that. We're going to get rid of this HIV problem by attacking something that we can literally control, which is the way these people use their drugs. And then that way, while they're in our presence, we can at least try to convince them to get off of them.
Yeah.
And there's been a small percentage I've seen that of people that continuously keep coming back. But I think I read like after like 6 months, they're having whole new crops of people come in. So like they're coming in, using for a little bit, and then they stop using, but they keep coming to get the help and the resources. And then when they get reestablished, they stop coming. And then new people come in. And so it's like not even really draining on their like society either, like for the amount of tax funds that are coming in, because it's not like it's lower and lower, I guess, amounts of people that come in, and effectively, I guess, eventually they won't really need them.
Yeah, that seems to be working in their favor, I guess.
So I like in this one because they do make the case like not everything has gone well, but it's also because it's very hard to tell. There wasn't a lot of data on this stuff before they implemented these policies. That's when they started to record a lot of it. And there's also a lot of things. So like you'll see if you go through some of these things, there's going to be increases in certain things that you would think would go down. But that's also because there's a lot of other factors at play. It's hard to tell whether or not that's because of these things. Like you can actually see I think they point out like drug use just overall, like with illicit substances or something like that.
Reported lifetime use of all illicit drugs increased from 7.8% to 12%. Lifetime use of
weed
cannabis
went up, cocaine doubled, ecstasy almost doubled.
Cocaine, heroin. So they say that maybe that's just because now that the stigma's gone socially, people are more apt to admit that they were doing those things over the years. But also I think that using drugs isn't the problem. It's using them to fill some sort of void that leads to the addiction. So like I smoke the weed, and as long as it doesn't ruin my life, I think it's not that bad. And the same thing, like I mean, if you want to do ecstasy, like maybe you want to microdose ecstasy.
Yeah, because
I'm not going to tell you not to do that if you're chill or not chill, but you know what I mean. Like if you're not
like I've had
fucking
some
with
amazing experiences.
Yes,
in my life
like
on
drugs are not all bad. Like, and case in point, alcohol. There's no medical benefits from alcohol at all.
No.
It does nothing but
poison.
hurt your body.
Yeah.
And make you feel a little bit loopy
you like
and
it.
happy or whatever. So
It's a little loose.
it's a little bit of loose juice. And so sometimes that's fine. And as long as you can do that responsibly and take care of yourself, then it's no problem. And I think that that's where the libertarian line comes in. It's like, look, do whatever drugs you want. But if you start becoming a menace to society, we're going to have to do something about that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean coming down and putting you in jail. Maybe it means like, hey, talking to you like, is there something going on? Like you seem to be doing a lot of cocaine, Richard.
Well, the difference is like helping rather than just trying to punish you.
Also want to point out that these numbers here that we just read, it sounded like we were saying that just in Portugal, all this shit was going up. And it says right here, the increase in drug use observed among adults in Portugal was not greater than that seen in nearby countries that did not change their drug laws.
So it's just kind of happening.
Yeah, so it's just kind of happening.
It's just
to
becoming, like
everybody,
you said, as it becomes less taboo,
just want to make sure
more people are willing to say and do it.
Which is good because it makes it seem like, but no, and so but I think it's probably a mixed bag. Like, you know, it's hard, like you said, it's hard to judge because this whole thing, it took us, we're just now in 2020, or not just now, but I mean, you know,
we're coming around to it.
It's just now realizing, 1980 shit was not the vibe.
It's not a good solution.
What I mean? That did not work. And it takes that. Like,
it takes a long time
years,
before you see the effects really play out.
Really
and so that you can see them clearly enough to say that they started or came from a certain time frame. Like, you can't just do that. You can't say from 1984 to 1989 and be like, oh, it's getting so much worse. Like, it probably only rose incrementally by then or something like that. But when you look at it back from when there's enough of a sample size, then you can say, okay, from the trajectory we're seeing, it's not playing out well.
Yeah.
And I think that we'll see that with these kinds of policies. Like this happened in 2001 is when these laws went into effect in Portugal.
Now we're seeing Oregon take effect with
Now
similar
Oregon's going to do it. Yeah. And so I think in
America.
maybe another 20 years, 40 years, we'll start seeing some of the effects of these policies and whether or not they are doing a better job. And I think that's the case, is that we as people that live in the society have to be willing to take some risks.
Yes.
To try new solutions.
Yeah, I agree.
There's going to be a little bit of pain in the way, but I mean, there's already pain now. So it's not like you're like, the idea is you can't have too short of a time frame, because if you're saying, well, we have to just eliminate all the pain right now, it's like, well, there's no way to do that. Like, but you can make it to where there's less pain in the future if you deal with a little bit more pain right now. Sacrifice. You're basically taking all of the risk from the future and shoving it into the present. And that could be beneficial if you do your cost benefit analysis correctly.
Yeah, look at marijuana legalization in
right.
Colorado and
That's
how
what I
it
was
was
gonna get
just
to.
a complete.
It's a boom. It's a
was
boom
like,
for that.
all right, well, we're going to take a
economy.
chance.
Yeah.
We're going to just let everybody smoke weed.
See
And
what
there was
happens.
tons of places, still tons of states that don't think it's the answer.
Yeah.
And tons of people who didn't think that'd be a good idea and even talked about it negatively for a long time. Now I think we can look back and say, like, what negative consequences? Like, what are you talking about?
What has happened?
All
Yeah.
this money we made, that's real negative.
You mean
All
your people?
Yeah, all these people being happy.
And it's so funny. I hear
better
people
standard
bring
of
up
living.
things. They'll be like, oh, well, the use of, or like the presence of like heroin and cocaine on the streets goes up if you do that, because you're taking away one of the
like we
substances
said
from
here,
the drug lords. And I'm like, so keep taking them.
Yeah.
Keep taking all of the things that they want to
Take
sell
them
to
all.
us illegally, and then they won't have anything to sell you because you'll be allowed to just buy the things that you want to buy as a full-grown person.
Oops,
Yeah.
no drug dealers.
Well,
It's like, stop letting drug dealers sell drugs to us.
That's one thing that we did create that force in the opposite end, right? Is like it creates the black market when you try and shut these things down. And so we really did see even more, it becomes an even messier situation. You're trying to put a lid on something that's, like you said, going to
Pandora's box. baby.
right? And
You've
then,
opened
then
it
we
now.
created
Yeah.
like a whole
And people
intersectional border war, you know, like
and
like
people
the-
want to like pretend like there's gonna be some way that we can like, well, let's just put like the only solution can be to put Pandora's box back in, put all the shit back in the box and close it. It's like that doesn't happen. You have to deal with the consequences as they
Never
are.
does.
Like the bed is made. Like there's no way. Like they'll be like, well, if we leave the Middle East, then something will happen. Something's always gonna happen. And like we stay, something happens. We leave, something happens. Like it's been done now. Like.
But like
You
you
done
said, to
dropped
get
the
back
milk.
to, we need to experiment more. Like that's why I think when we were talking about like moving cops and stuff, I'm gonna try it. You know, try
something
like,
else.
Try
Yeah.
it and
Yeah.
see and study it and see how it works for you, and then be willing to change if it doesn't or if
Yeah.
it does or whatever. But we're seeing more of this. You know, weed, cannabis is very legal in a lot of states now. We're now seeing legal psilocybin too. Like, you
Yeah.
take mushrooms now.
True
That's
that.
legal in a couple
Very true.
states.
Shout
so-
out to my mushroom trips while I was in the army.
I
I remember you guys.
Dude, that stuff. We got to talk about psychedelics one time, like
Oh,
on a
yeah.
different episode, because non-addictive.
I think we could
but
do it. That would be a fun
non-addictive,
episode
but
to do.
Also,
Just
they're just
psychedelics.
like- but there's just like a whole thing in there on self.
We could do
I
the
get into
entire
people
episode
all
on
the
acid.
time about. Oh,
I was about to
so
say we should
fun.
do this psychedelics
That'd be so
episode
fun.
on psychedelics.
I'm totally down for that.
Yeah,
I'm
we should
totally
do
down
that.
For the record, I'm down.
I'm totally down for that. That'd
Totally
be fun.
down.
But yeah, just talk about something that's in a completely
Yeah.
different realm. I get into conversations all the time with people about the efficacy of those drugs, and I'm like,
You know what I just thought about while we were talking? You think robots are gonna take drugs?
Robot drugs.
damn,
Robot
how did
addiction?
we miss that
God
last
damn.
episode. How did we miss that? Yes, I do.
You do?
I totally do.
What, are they gonna
Dude,
just,
are
like,
you gonna
huff
tell me if
fucking
they can't
battery
just
Well,
charges?
if we're talking
like
about
upload a program and it
if
yanks
we're
your kilobytes
talking,
up by
yeah,
the-
if we're talking about sentient robots, then I feel like they will be just like humans, and they'll do all kinds of crazy
Yep.
things to change the
They'll
way
be
that their
jerking off.
programming works.
They'll be jerking off and shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that episode of Futurama where you're jacking in.
It's like every look. Video games come with cheat codes.
Yeah.
Somebody puts a cheat
You
code.
love
in.
them cheat
You
codes,
love it,
baby.
dude.
They
Like,
had to
they're
program
gonna
that
do-
in there.
They're gonna
they're
put
gonna-
that. They're gonna figure out some
AI
way
is gonna mod
to
a fucking
mo-
blunt.
to
You be like,
figure
yo,
out
you ever
the
seen
way
the
to
robot backwards?
configure their little.
I roll the best
consciousness.
blunts.
I roll mega blunts.
Like some sort of like pipeline size blunt. Look at my blunt.
Yeah, I definitely think they would, because like we said, it's a human condition.
Yeah, I don't know why I wanted to.
Not only
Maybe it's
derail
just
this
a
conversation.
consciousness
but
congestion.
the want to, you feel trapped. You feel trapped by your consciousness. Your consciousness is stuck in this body, and it is a certain way. And
It makes you aware of your limitations.
right, and so you
That
do
son of a
sometimes
bitch.
want to get away from it or bust out of what it means to be you all the time. You know, and I think drugs, alcohols, all those things, anything that give you that loopy feeling you said.
Yeah.
That's why we huff paint and gas and lick
Jenkem.
lick the bark on a fucking woo tree. Or
Yeah,
Whatever.
some toads
Sucking
and
on
stuff.
toads.
some
and-
peyotes.
Yeah, doing whatever.
I mean, I think we've seen it through all societies since like forever. I mean, dude, that's the interesting
Animals,
thing.
dude,
Like,
those-
what's the first drug?
The whole idea
Cannabis.
of
Yo, I just watched this Joe Rogan about that. Did you
the
watch that one?
reindeers and the mushrooms
Yeah, no, well,
and the
yeah.
whole thing about Story of Christmas.
Yeah, well, he talks about that too. But I'm talking about the recent interview he did with the guy who was trying to find in all these old Christian traditions the use of this specific fermented wine
Yeah.
that was supposed to make you hallucinate. Like they would put a hallucinogenic in it, or that it was like this added.
Fermentation.
Yeah,
Dude,
they
that was
think-
a huge thing for ancient culture.
And they think like DMT or hallucinogens,
Like
were
ayahuasca
involved,
type
like
of-
ayahuasca type
I
stuff.
believe that.
So it's like this whole fucking long
Oh, yeah.
JRE with this guy who's dedicated his life to that.
I think I
And
watched
it
that
was-
one where they had the conversation that like basically the whole premise is that religion is actually just the stories that were passed down of psychological
Psychological trips. basically, yeah.
psychedelic trips. Not
Yeah. So
psychological.
that's where whoo man.
Yeah.
I want to watch it again.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Opium poppies, opioids seem to be
Yeah,
the
one of the oldest things,
recorded. Which
from like the Old
plants.
West. I
Yeah.
remember that opium. Even I guess it probably. I mean, I know that was happening at the same time in Japan. I'm fascinated by this, like the contrast between Japan in the 1860s to the 1900s and the West in the 1860s to the 1900s. But you see opium as like a huge thing, coming from mostly from the East. Like a lot of the people that came to America that had opium were like the Chinese and the Taiwanese that were building the railroads and stuff like that. They introduced opium to a lot of settlements there. But I know that for sure, like the Native Americans were tripping on shit too.
Yeah, I'm
Like it's
peyote and-
old
Oh, yeah.
as old gets.
Well, like you said, psilocybin, cannabis, all these things are leaves. They're all plants.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, somebody stumbled upon a long
Yeah, the
time ago.
Mayans, which we don't even know how far back that civilization actually goes, they were definitely messing around with some.
Yo, shout out
ayahuasca, peyote
one
type stuff.
time for the people, the humans who died trying all the plants.
Yeah,
Thank you.
the ones that got us.
Thank you.
The ones that got
Yeah.
us things like cannabis.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you.
But
I
they
mean, you had to eat poison ivy to
first.
find
Yeah.
out that you couldn't eat poison
Yeah.
ivy, and I appreciate
That's
that.
They had to eat all those mushrooms until they
That's
found the
true.
psilocybin that gives you that nice.
Right? Some of them
trip.
give you fungus. Some of them trip the fuck.
Some of them just kill you. Some you eat. Some of them sons of bitches, they just kill you.
It's just poison.
True. That's so true. But that's like I think one thing that we said it's always gonna prevail is I think addictions come from that, you have a hole in you and you're constantly trying to fill that hole. We talked about it. It's not always substances. It's like even when you look at people who are hoarders, they're just addicted to keeping things.
Yeah.
A lot of that's dealing with some type of psychological trauma or
Some sort of loss,
or
where they felt like everything was taken.
just
Yeah.
whatever. So-
Genetical predisposition for that too.
yeah,
Sure.
I think that some people are more likely to fall into that, just like anything, some
True.
people are more likely to do all types of different things, so I definitely think that. But either way, I think that it's a human problem, and it's not necessarily one that we can solve.
It might actually end up being a robot problem.
beating each other up about it.
Yeah, it's much more complex than we originally thought, and I think that we're finally starting to notice that. And
I hope that people take that away from this, that it's because it's so tough. Like I said, with something that we've all dealt with, like we've all had people, and it's hard, dude. Imagine, like, none of us had to, well, I don't know about you necessarily, but I know obviously we did. Like, my parents weren't crackheads, I don't know what that must feel like when it's like that thing took your mom from you and turned your parent into a zombie, or your brother, your sister, or something, and you have to watch them go through that. But I just think it's compassion. That's the best thing we can do for people like that. It's easy to try and judge them or get mad at them or whatever, blame them for that. And I'm not necessarily saying it's not people's fault that they get that way, but it definitely seems if we're gonna ever solve it, it's not about come from
that
shunning each
segues
other.
perfectly into this Portugal and rehabilitation and redemption arcs. You know, it's not going to work for everybody, but I think that when it comes to substance abuse, that should be the number one approach is redemption and rehabilitation and
trying to help that.
Yeah,
person.
cleaning yourself up, however you want to phrase it. So, you know, to just break that dependency.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it's just solving whatever underlying issue caused you to do drugs in the first place.
Yeah.
Yep.
You just reach down there and you fucking find out, you pull on that thread all the way down and you figure out what it is at the bottom of there and then you have to fucking deal with it.
It's
And
tough.
sometimes it's really fucking hard.
And
yeah.
it's hard for the state to deal with it. Previously, just putting us in jail didn't work.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, they just really weren't equipped to handle it. And they really
I
still
don't-
aren't.
I still don't know if they were trying to. You
It's
know,
hard to say,
It's
yeah.
hard to say whether or not
if
that
they're
was just
even
profit
trying
based
to
or
help,
Yeah.
or if they just saw an opportunity to, you know,
make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can as a culture, I think, get better too.
I think we're gonna figure this stuff out, and I mean, like I said, I don't think we're gonna eliminate it, but we'll find a way and a place to fit drugs in our society, just like we will in our personal lives. That isn't a detriment to us, you know.
Exactly.
Doesn't hold us down. So,
all right, until next time.
I appreciate you.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like